Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to some race reaction to the 2022 Emilia Romagna Grand Prix from the wonderful but a bit soggy Imola. Yeah, what do you reckon to that one? I'm not sure what to make of it. It was all right. I don't think it's going to go down as race of the season or anything bonkers like that, but I quite enjoyed that one, especially the tension, just waiting for that rain to come that never turned up again in the end. But yeah, great day for Red Bull. Crap day for Ferrari, as it turns out. So we'll get into that in just a moment. Dan's back tonight as well, so we've got Dan with us. So brace yourself, that could be good fun. But let's have a look at this race result. Thank you very much, by the way, to Andrew for the early super chat, who says Seb points, woo. Absolutely woo. Where's that come from? From Aston Martin. Double points. Anyway, your race result for Imola. Max Verstappen taking his second win of the season, as Sky kept pointing out 7,000 times in their post-show. It's either win or bust for Max this season, so there you go. Make of that what you will. Sergio Perez is second place in the second Red Bull. I think brilliant today from him. Lando Norris, I mean, who would have thought that after the opening race of the season? Third place for him. Fourth for George Russell, having a cracking season, I think, in that terrible car. Valtteri Bottas in fifth. Charles Leclerc, only sixth, but actually probably with a few laps to go, he'd have taken that. Seventh for Tsunoda. Eighth for Sebastian Vettel, as touched on there with Kevin Magnussen. Couple more points on the board for Haas. 10th place for Lance Stroll. And by the way, with that double points finish, or even just one of those points finishes, wouldn't matter which one, all 10 teams have scored, and we've only had 4 races. So there you go. Good stuff. Alex Albon in 11th place. Pierre Gasly 12th. Lewis Hamilton only 13th. Some apologies from Toto Wolff over the radio. It wasn't very good. And of course, as someone's just pointed out in chat there, lapped by Verstappen. Esteban Ocon 14th after his penalty. 15th for Zhou, who had a bit of a disappointing weekend. Nicholas Latifi 16th. Mick Schumacher, a little bit disappointed of him today. 17th place. Only 18th for Daniel Ricciardo. And then your DNFs. Fernando Alonso and Carlos Sainz. We will get into why those DNFs happened, of course, a little bit later in the stream. But I'm going to get emotional now. Been so long. Evening, Dan.
Good evening, mate. How are we?
Oh, all the better for hearing you. Where you been?
I've been watching F1, mate. I've been watching this new season. It's pretty good. I don't know if you've seen any of it.
Not much. No, I try to avoid Formula One where I can, as I'm sure you know. Yeah, we'll kick off with that then before we get into the race reaction. You know, very quickly, Dan. 4 races down. What have you made of F1's new era? I've not spoken to you since January.
Yeah, I know. Since the first test, I think it was the first day of the first test. Is the last
of course it was. Yeah,
so, yeah, which is still a long time ago. It's been a great season so far. I'm really enjoying it. I mean, I think the last time we spoke, maybe I don't want to be negative straight off the ripper, but maybe we would have liked a few more cars in the fight at the front. But even still, I think what we wanted from these regulations, close racing all the way through the field, mixed up grids. That's exactly what we've got. I'm really enjoying it so far this year. And I think today, not a bad one. I think all weekend long with the mixed conditions, with different guys at the front, again, fights all the way through the midfield. I'm happy with these new regs. So yeah, enjoying it.
Yeah, I mean, I said at the start there that I don't think it's going to go down as race of the season or anything like that, but it was an enjoyable race, and it was tense, wondering if that rain's going to come in. Is anyone going to make a mistake? Because it was one of those races, wasn't it, where dip one of those slick tyres onto a wet patch and it could be an absolute disaster. So there's always that tension there, isn't there? And is anyone going to try a stop? So I think it was all right. I'd probably rank it higher than Australia. Perhaps controversially, I don't know, but I thoroughly enjoyed that race. I thought it was brilliant. I mean, we'll jump into the reaction. As you know how these work, Dan. We'll try and go through the field as best we can, starting with the first 3 teams, which are Red Bull, McLaren and Mercedes again. Mercedes nowhere all weekend, always seem to be at the start of these streams. We'll get to that in a second, but Max Verstappen, I think it's pretty fair to say, faultless weekend from him, and indeed the race. I mean, he got out front, didn't he? Got a good start, sort of came across a little bit to cover Charles Leclerc, but didn't need to in the end because both Ferraris got disappointing starts. Certainly Leclerc did anyway and fell behind Norris and co. But it's sort of from that first chicane onwards, just really untouchable, wasn't he? Nobody ever threatened him, and it's like I say, faultless. What more can I say? It's going to be one of those days where people are going to go, Sean, you've not talked enough about Verstappen. You must be a Verstappen hater. But there's not much to say other than give him the best compliment possible and say it was perfect. And obviously not it wasn't easy because, again, dip a wheel on the wet stuff and you're in trouble, but it looked fairly comfortable, didn't it? Let's be honest.
Yeah, I'm starting to think he's quite good, this Verstappen bloke.
Yeah, I've
I
heard.
don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah, I don't really know what it is, but no, today you're right. It was a comfortable win, a really measured drive from Verstappen, which yes, I think we've seen that before. We've seen it many times before, but he just seemed in control the whole way through. And I partly feel for him that I don't think this technically counts as a grand slam because of sprint qualifying yesterday. He wasn't in the lead. But even yesterday, he wasn't leading the whole way through. He took his time, made that move when it really mattered at the end of sprint quali. And today didn't get caught out on the start, which was probably in those mixed conditions the real pinch point of that race for Max. If he could get a good start and stay in front of Charles, I think he would have instantly had that confidence and streaked away, but it didn't really matter because Leclerc didn't get the start and it was Checo behind. But you're right, he was pretty much unchallenged throughout the entire race. That early safety car was the only real chance I think Checo had of getting past him. And even when they had that freedom of a 43-second gap at the end to make an extra pit stop, that's nuts in itself. But just that was the only time where something potentially could have gone wrong. You're right. There's not really much more to add with Max. I just think he's really entering this stage of his career now where all of those crashed up and jokes from 2017 and 18 that's completely gone. And already, I think from last year, the Max we're seeing this season just seems a lot calmer, a lot more in control of what's going on. And the first four races so far this year, yes, he's not got the points he's deserved, but even in Bahrain and Australia, he was hella fast in both of those Grand Prix. Should have finished second or first in both of them. So, though Leclerc has the points at the moment, don't discount Max this year because last year he was great. I think this year already, might be a bit early to say this, but I think already he may be starting to one up last year. I think he's been that good so far this season. And today he was just awesome, untouchable.
Well, this is it, isn't it? Without those mechanical issues, that's 2 second places he would have had. So that championship is a lot closer than it looks right now. So we have to take that into account with Max. I don't think he's done an awful lot wrong this year. The issue has been with the car, the power unit specific, or the fuel. The area around the fuel. Here we go. Let's get technical. The bit where the juice goes in. Something in there keeps going wrong at Red Bull. This feels like a great time to say thanks, Track Limits, for your super chat. Says, great channel. Just want to support the best live F1 race reactions. Latifi didn't crash. Thank you very much. Apologies for my brilliant technical analysis there. But yeah, not a lot wrong today from Max. Just have a look at my notes, really. Did go to slicks after Perez. I mean, they had the luxury to react, didn't they? They had the gap. They didn't need to worry about it. Lapped Lewis Hamilton. Lap 41 is in the notes. He said afterwards, they did actually put to him, that's got to be quite satisfying, I think, was essentially the question that was put to him in the pen. And he said, look, they've been slow all year. So I think the point being that it's not satisfying because that's your rival. You don't want to be lapping your rival. You want to be fighting with your rival at the front. So lapping a slower car isn't really something you get much joy from. But I'd like to think there was a nod as he goes past, see you, Lewis. Hope to see you back at the front soon, mate. I want another crack at you like we had last year. But we'll get onto Mercedes later. But I just think Max was. I mean, are we surprised where the driving? He has his moments, but we go back to Brazil 2016. Yeah, I'm bringing it up. That save, and then last time we were in Imola, it was a little bit damp and tricky conditions. He was pretty comfortable in that one too. So I mean, I don't know why we're really surprised by this if we are at all.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I wouldn't say surprised because we have come to just expect this from Verstappen, like you say, in those conditions, and also just how good he's been over the last couple of years. I think more so going into this weekend, that was a big lead Leclerc had in the championship, and I'm certain we'll talk about Leclerc later on. But I think the fact he was so far away, and of course Carlos had his moments at the start, I think maybe that's more where the surprise comes from a Ferrari point of view rather than Max. And also Checo has been pretty on it so far this year. So for him to be, was it 12 seconds or about at the checkered flag at the finish, that's quite a gap. But most drivers were making mistakes at some point this weekend, and I don't really think Max made anything sizable, at least. I think he skipped over the chicane once at the early part of quali, but apart from that, faultless weekend.
Yeah, I think Checo had a good one today as well. I tend to agree. I mean, yeah, 16.5 off at the end, but he kind of, with the greatest of respect to Checo, he kind of did what you'd expect a second driver to do today, or what Red Bull need a second driver to do. He came through yesterday to get himself into play for the race. He had a great start and got ahead of, or Leclerc had a terrible start, whichever way you want to look at it, depending on, I guess, which way you lean with your bias is one way to put it. You know, he got past Leclerc at the start, stayed behind Verstappen. When Leclerc closed in, he managed to keep him behind. He made a couple of mistakes, which could have been very costly. Was overcut by Leclerc, but the warmer tyres that Perez had, he was able to get straight back through again. Didn't let Leclerc go. Fought hard to defend that position, or pushed hard to defend that position. And of course, in the end, it was Leclerc that made the mistake. We will talk about Ferrari, but they'll have to wait until we've got through the top three teams, unfortunately. So, yeah, I think Perez, like I say, a couple of mistakes that he needs to iron out, because on another day, that's punished. And Red Bull, I'm not going to say the race would have changed. I think Verstappen would still have had that quite comfortably come the end of the Grand Prix. But, you know, there is always that risk, isn't there? Leclerc gets P2, maybe smells a bit of blood, and then flat out pushes hard, and you end up with a battle at the front that maybe costs Red Bull. So he can't afford to be doing that too often, Checo. But aside from that, about what I'd expect from a second driver, which again is what Red Bull need him to do, and it's what he did towards the back end of last season and at times last season. But if he can continue that this year and do it consistently, then Red Bull could be quite ominous. This could be quite an ominous moment for the weekend. You know, no real mistakes from Max, apart from, like you say, a bit harsh, running over the chicane in qualifying. Oh, what a fraud. And then, you know, Sergio Perez, a couple of errors today. That's about all I've got on him. But I'll just have a quick look through my notes while I'm just having a look. I mean, there was a phase in that race where he was absolutely flying, delivering fastest lap after fastest lap, building the gap to Leclerc, cutting the gap actually to his teammate at one stage. I'm not sure what would have happened if he caught him. I suspect possibly a radio call, but, you know, they say they're free to race at this stage. We'll see. That's when he made the mistake, of course, at the Variante Alta chicane, which then allowed Leclerc in. So I wonder if he was given a little bit of a calm down, Checo, over the radio that we didn't hear. Just keep pushing, but, you know, you don't need to be delivering those laps constantly, because you're just going to put us under pressure here. But just got on with it, didn't he, Checo? It's hard to say that I'm massively impressed with him, because, you know, if Checo's got the car underneath him, I believe he can deliver, as he showed last year, as he's shown this year. Had a pole position, of course, in Saudi. But it's hard to say it was perfect, because it wasn't, because he made those mistakes. So I feel a little bit harsh picking on those mistakes. But do you know what I'm saying when I say that, you know, another day that goes punished and suddenly it all falls apart or could all fall apart for Red Bull?
Yeah, because they kind of did have that luxury that it was only Leclerc fighting them. I think if Sainz had been in that battle as well, you've instantly straight away got not only two Ferraris in that fight at the front, but you've got that mix of strategy. So a mistake like that from Perez, you're right, lucky-ish to go unpunished. But I still think what I was pleasantly surprised with Checo this weekend and so far this season, that I don't think we saw enough of last year, is the fact that he's been aggressive with his overtakes and actually being able to make those overtakes stick. It's something we always said about Gasly, we always said about Albon, and Perez was much better than those two last year in that Red Bull car. But 7th on the grid in sprint quali, not brilliant from Perez, but that was a nuts Friday qualifying session in itself anyway. So I'm not going to have a go at him for that. But the ability to get through yesterday, keep it clean, which he didn't always do in sprint races last season. I'm thinking Silverstone in particular, but kept it clean, moved forward a couple of places. Lovely start today. And you're right, Red Bull needs someone who not necessarily can keep up with Max, because that's going to be an incredible challenge for any driver, but someone who can be there when you've got other top runners dropping out, like we saw today. And Perez, yeah, those mistakes that they will come. Almost every driver will have at least one of those mistakes at some point in that season, but it just needs to be made sure that it's not every single race. And he hasn't done that. We saw Leclerc make a mistake today. Spoilers if you haven't seen the race. So look, if he can just keep the progress I think he's already made over the first 4 races, Perez, he'll be fine. But you're right. Just no more, please, Checo.
Yeah, and but then they're mistakes that anyone can make in those conditions, aren't they? If that's a dry track, I'd be way more critical. You shouldn't be doing that. Yeah. But in the wet, you know, these things happen. You're pushing hard. I'm not going in on Checo for it at all, because I don't think that's fair. It's changeable conditions, mistakes happen, but it didn't cost the team today. My point is that another day it might have done, but also my point being that he is the second driver, and he did exactly what Red Bull will have wanted him to do today. So it's hard to... What I'm trying to say, if I'm not explaining it very well, is that I'm not criticising him for those mistakes. I'm just saying be careful in future, but I'm not criticising him overall, because at the end of the day, he's the second driver, whether people accept that or not. He is the second driver. He's P2 today to the first driver and kept the main championship rival behind. So that's exactly what he was meant to do. So that's why I'd say that Perez had a very good race. I wouldn't say it was perfect, because it wasn't, but it was as good as it needed to be. Nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So, but Red Bull, big turnaround in the championship, closed the gap on Ferrari. The child inside me is a little bit disappointed that they scored points today, because they were on 69 yesterday. So, lol. But, grow up. Anyway, but big point swing today, and that's really brought this championship back to life. I still think Leclerc's looking good, and Ferrari look very, very good as well, but Red Bull ain't out of this, and as long as they've sorted that reliability out, I'd still maybe controversially argue they've got the fastest car overall and the fastest overall package at the moment. They just need to get that reliability sorted, and I think they've got a shot at taking this title. But Ferrari are not gonna let this go. This is their best shot since 07 for the drivers and 08 probably for the constructors. I know Vettel had a great start a couple of times during the Mercedes dominance, but I never felt as though Ferrari were quite in it. People think that's mad, but and it's a really weird thing to explain, but you look at Ferrari this year and I feel like they're in this championship fight. I always felt like Mercedes had too much in 2017 and 18 for Ferrari to overcome that. So I'm just excited, Dan. I'm quite happy for this to carry on. If Verstappen wants to win in Miami and then Leclerc can take Spain and maybe Monaco, be nice for a home Grand Prix win, then Verstappen wins a couple, then Leclerc wins a couple again. We'll have that all season, and we'll go down to Abu Dhabi and have an epic finale.
I mean, that would be great. I think everyone's going to... Yeah, exactly. And also as well, I mean, with 4 races down and already just the spread of the field, you're saying that Red Bull have the quickest car. I'm not really going to disagree with you, but I think it's one of the big features of this year that's been so good is that every single weekend, the cars, in terms of performance, are just all over the place. I mean, the team that were out in Q1 in the first race of the season with both cars, or almost both cars, got a podium today. So I'm still hoping that a few more cars are going to find out those little secrets and maybe not so much challenge Ferrari and Red Bull every single weekend. But I'd like to think the progress that some teams have made so far, I would like to hope that maybe we've got a couple more cars in the fight at the front. But even if we don't, Ferrari versus Red Bull, that's a great fight in itself. Last year, we had 2 drivers fighting for the title, and what a season that was. So I'm not going to be too picky at this stage, but it's nice that things just aren't the run of the mill yet. They're all over the place, which is awesome.
Yeah, and I'll say here now, sitting here with no confidence saying Red Bull have the fastest car. It's very close at the front. It could be Ferrari in Miami. It could be Red Bull in Spain. I'm hoping it's one of those seasons. We kind of had it a little bit last year, didn't we, where there were some races where you go, oh, it looks like Mercedes have got the best package, and then Red Bull turn up the next week and you go, oh, no, it looks like Red Bull have got the best package. And that was always quite fun. So I'm hoping for that one. But let's roll on to McLaren. Is it controversial to say it was a mixed bag for them today? I don't think it's very controversial at all. Lando Norris, absolutely kind of faultless as well today. Delivered a very lonely but solid drive that saw him pretty much guaranteed 4th place at one stage. And then when a little bit of luck fell his way, if you want to call it that way, or a mistake from Leclerc, however you want to look at it, he was there to pick up those pieces, as I keep saying on this channel, and got himself a podium 2nd year in a row at Imola as well. So really, really good drive from him. I'll be honest, I've not got a lot in my notes for him because it was quite a lonely day. He was P4, great start, got ahead of Leclerc, not far off Perez as well, going down to turn 1, but got ahead of Leclerc. Eventually was overtaken by the Ferrari and then just settled into his race, delivering consistent lap times, pitted when he needed to. Everything just kind of worked for McLaren today, and then he cruised his way to what would have been P4, and then Leclerc made his mistake, and there was P3 for him. So really chuffed for Lando, really chuffed for McLaren as well, because maybe it's a cliche at this stage, but it's quite the turnaround from where they were a few weeks ago. They were concerned. Like I did a news video, or in one of the previews, I was talking about Ricciardo saying that, you know, this isn't an overnight fix. This isn't going to come good anytime soon. Potentially, it could take several races, and then a race or two later, and look where they are in the championship. I mean, podium today, they're good finish as well in Australia for Norris, if I recall. I think I can't remember. It was 2 weeks ago. And
I think it's 5th and 6th.
It was, wasn't it? Yeah, both cars scored. So pretty damn bang on from Lando Norris today. Just a shame that Daniel Ricciardo had his moment. But we'll start with a positive, Dan. Podium for Norris, big points.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, I think that's the big thing just staring everyone in the face is that this was a team that struggled so much in that first weekend. And I visibly remember sitting there on that first weekend in Bahrain thinking, I can't believe McLaren are a backmarker team. Can't believe it. And I thought it's one of those things that we're just going to have to get used to out in Q1 McLaren. And that's the nature of these regulations. Didn't ever think that 3 races later they would be on the podium. I mean, you're right. It was a race today from Norris that was just, I don't want to say faultless because we didn't see a lot of it. From what we could see, it was faultless. He did exactly what he needed to. That great start really paid dividends because he was just able to get away from Russell, get away from Bottas, and just kind of be in this world of his own where as long as he didn't make a mistake, as long as he stayed on top of the conditions, and as long as there wasn't a safety car, he was going to get 4th, which you rightly say turned into 3rd with Leclerc's mistake. But it's obviously great for McLaren that they've been able to turn it around. But also I'm concerned is the wrong word, but maybe confused that last time out in Australia when Norris was, obviously very happy with 5th and 6th for the team, he was saying that they hadn't really had any upgrades and that they were still slightly concerned that the car they had was the same they had in Bahrain. And again, that's great that the regulations this year can do that. But also for McLaren, I don't want to get too carried away just yet, if that makes sense, because if they're really still sure that, that could happen again, that's not great for them. But also they say one thing, they do a lot of other things behind closed doors. And I'm sure there has been a few upgrades. And I know it was the brakes, wasn't it? In Bahrain, I think in particular was what was really hurting them. So yeah, happy for them. Big result for Norris today. It's nice that we've already had 4 teams on the podium in just 4 races. And if we can keep having surprises like this, if Norris can continue what he was doing last year, which he already seems to have been doing this year with his consistency, they'll be fine. They'll be good. And yeah, strong drive from Norris today.
Yes, I think they did have some updates this weekend that they've obviously made some sort of a difference, but I don't think anybody turned up with a massive upgrade package. I know Red Bull bought a few bits. I think Ferrari probably did, even though they played it down a bit. I know there's a new floor on at least one of the Alpines. So yeah, there's a few bits out there updates wise, but the reason I'm not getting carried away with McLaren, sorry McLaren fans, is because Melbourne, Imola, not really. Oh, what's the word I'm looking for? They're not really the same as some of the tracks we're going to be visiting this season. They're quite unique. It's like going to Monaco and saying, wow, what a weekend they've had. They're going to win the championship. And actually, it's because it was Monaco. It could be quite track specific. And that was one of the lines that came out after Australia a lot was this was track specific. So it could be a little bit of that. We know Lando Norris can deliver in the wet as well. We saw last year, or at least in these conditions, tricky conditions, got the podium there as well. So it's going to be interesting to see where they are. I think probably Spain. I mean, Miami is another one that's going to be a little bit unrepresentative in some ways, isn't it? So I think Spain could be an interesting one for McLaren to kind of get a real feeling of where they are. But I think probably 4th fastest. It's really difficult because I look at Mercedes. Like, are they the 3rd fastest? Really? I'm not convinced they are, and I'm not convinced McLaren are the 3rd fastest. So maybe it is just Red Bull and Ferrari, or Ferrari and Red Bull, and then everybody else. It could just be one of those seasons, but that's fine. Other side of the garage, though. Oh, Danny Rick. I thought this was over. I mean, up and down season last season. Difficult at times at the start of this season, but then a fantastic or a really good, strong performance in Australia. And then today gets it all wrong at turn 1. Slides into Carlos Sainz. I mean, he said he thought he was hit from behind. I've watched the replays and I don't see that. There looks to be enough space for him on the inside. Carlos Sainz on the outside. I'd say Sainz is ahead as well. Danny Rick's kind of gone on the curb, maybe a bit damp and got a, or definitely a bit damp, and then got a slide on and just understeered a little bit into the side of Sainz. It's not Sainz's fault. I'm even going to go as far as say it's not really Ricciardo's fault. If you had to give a penalty for that, because in F1 apparently we do for most things, we have to give a penalty, then you probably would give it to Ricciardo, but I don't think that's worthy of a penalty for either driver. It's just one of those first lap, damp track, tricky conditions. proper turn one incident. So I mean, it ruined Carlos's race. I mean, it destroyed his race. He was out pretty much instantly, but really frustrating because that kind of completely destroyed Ricciardo's race. And then, I mean, we'll talk about the incident, but I'm also going to point out the fact that for some reason McLaren then pitted him an extra time and put him on hard tyres, which I'm so confused about. I mean, I don't think we've seen a hard tyre all weekend. Cool track, slippery conditions, and they put the least. I don't get the hard tyre choice. You'd have thought mediums or gone for some softs towards the end, but very odd. I suppose in that position, nothing to lose, I guess.
I mean, yeah, there wasn't a lot to lose, but you're right. I mean, it was an interesting decision, but I suppose at that stage of the race, maybe they were thinking that maybe it was a 2-stop at that point, and the mediums wouldn't get all the way to the end. Would be the only thing that I could throw their way there. But I suppose if you're that far behind as well, and it's not as if we've had a lot of hard running at all this year, maybe it's a good time to test. I don't know. But I pretty much agree with everything you said about that turn one incident. Tricky conditions. I think we were lucky to really only have that incident and then whatever Mick Schumacher decided to do off the off the side of that incident. But yeah, Carlos, aggressive, going around the outside in those conditions, but did absolutely nothing wrong. Left plenty of space, was right up against the white line on the outside of the corner. So you can't put any blame at his door, in my opinion. And Danny Rick, I don't really want to say he's gone slightly hot because I don't think he has. I think, if anything, maybe he's hugged that inside apex a little bit too much, a little bit slippy, gone in slightly too deep and almost understeered into the back tyre of Carlos Sainz. But that's slam dunk racing incident. I mean, there's been bigger incidents I've said have been racing incident, and that, yes, if you want to say it's cop out, fine, be like that. But that's exactly what it was. Danny Rick, there's no malice in that. He wants to get through the corner. He's not trying to crash into Sainz. He's turning all the way. Nothing really he could have done from that particular angle unless he braked a tiny little bit earlier. And that's the margins in Formula One sometimes, and that's the way it goes. Lucky to get out of that though, Danny Rick. I mean, at one stage when Bottas went into the back of him, it was almost as if they were going to be all three of them going crashing into each other in a massive pile-up. So lucky to get out of the gravel as well. And I think you're right. They went early on the intermediates. Brave. I mean, that was the right thing to do with being at the back of the grid after that safety car. Played off a little bit because he ended up behind Lewis Hamilton for quite a while, didn't he? And was kind of in that huge train that was from, I want to say, 9th place down to 15th at one point. So, you know, he kind of was in the fight for points at one point. But then, yeah, hard tyres. Again, another gamble, which didn't really pay off. I'm not, confused is not really the right word because we're only 4 races in, but it's been a slightly disappointing start, I would say, for Danny Rick so far this year. I think he's more on top of this year's McLaren than that last year's. Last time out in Australia, I think it's case in point, right there with Lando Norris at the checkered flag. This weekend, sprint quali was pretty much matching Norris in Friday quali and sprint quali. So I would like to think if lap 1, turn 1 didn't happen, he'd have been in that fight for 4th and 5th with Lando. But equally, it did. No points on a weekend where, if we're saying this is one of those weekends where McLaren are scoring big, it's one of those ones that suits their car, that might come back to haunt him in future races. But yeah, overall for McLaren, great weekend. But Danny Rick, you do have to feel for him a little bit. He just never seems to get the luck.
Yeah, it's just been one of those. He just can't seem to get the move right, can he? Is this just inherited Alonso's cursing, move curse, or whatever you want to call it, team move curse? Just Sandro in chat saying that McLaren said after the race they tried something to see if it would work, saying that they had nothing to lose anyway. So sort of as I suspected there, that's why they put the hards on, just see what happens, I suppose. Also, it's good data, isn't it, for Lando? If the hard tyre suddenly comes alive and it's super quick, then it's maybe worth sticking him on that one. But then at the same time, Lando was so comfortable where he was, I don't think he needed to worry about that one. So yeah, just disappointing for Danny Rick. You're right, he's lucky to get out of there because Carlos Sainz didn't. Obviously going in backwards, possibly not expecting to be in there, a bit different. Danny Rick can maybe see that one coming a bit, but got out to the grass and got going, but his race was destroyed from there. Apparently, I think it was Ted saying afterwards that the diffuser at the back of the car, which obviously cars are relying on massively this year, was damaged as well, which has probably, or absolutely, almost certainly contributed to why he had such a a disappointing day in the end. Poor race pace. But yeah, absolutely great stuff from McLaren in terms of Lando Norris. Great stuff from Red Bull. Also, great stuff from George Russell. That Mercedes is a terrible car. I'm not for 1 second going to say that's a good car. They seem to think there is some good pace in there that they can maybe unlock, which is good to hear. And if they can understand the car better, get the balance right, then maybe they'll be back in the fight. Although Lewis Hamilton has been clear post-race that he is not in the title fight. Looking at the championship, you can totally understand why he's saying that one. The car's not good. The porpoising's horrendous. It looks awful, just generally, and also looks awful to drive. But George Russell is pulling the results out. That's another 4th place finish. He's still top 4, I think, in the Drivers' Championship, or top 3 in the Drivers' Championship, something like that. He's delivering the results. It feels as though that car, I don't know if the car suits George more, or if George has just been able to get to grips with it. Maybe driving around it, I don't know, but it's quite, you just expect that it would be Lewis Hamilton to hop in that car and get to grips with it, and George, his first time with the team, maybe struggle a little bit. But I'm going to throw something out there before we talk about the race, because it's literally just come into my head, and it's maybe a bit weird. Is it possible, Dan? And I know we're great with the technical stuff, but isn't it Is it possible that those years driving a difficult Williams are kind of helping him a little bit here? Is that a wild thing to say? Chat are gonna be like, "Oh, Sean, you idiot! What are you on about?" But I'm just thinking he's not had that nice, wonderful Mercedes to drive. He's been driving a difficult Williams, and then gets in his car. Maybe he can find a way to drive around it a little bit more easily. Just a thought. Don't shoot me.
Yeah, no, I don't dislike that idea. I mean, it's what, 2009 since Hamilton was in a car as bad as this and in a fight like this. So yeah, I mean, Hamilton's used to fighting the very best. So I'd like to think the midfield is going to be again, that's going to be a bit harsh said, slightly below his level, but you'd like to think Hamilton would be able to boss it in that midfield, even if his car's not quite up to scratch. But I don't dislike that theory, mate. I don't dislike it. And I wonder as well, not to, get too carried away with the tinfoil hat time, but I wonder the fact that Lewis has been so used to the Mercedes all over these years, and this year's new regulation is just so different, whereas George has kind of accepted the fact that he's joining the new team and it's going to be a new car and he's going to have to learn and adapt. So I don't know how much that's got to do with it as well, but I think you might be onto something. I don't dislike it. Chat probably say something different.
No, I mean, somebody in chat saying Julie saying it's plausible. I don't think any of my theories have ever been plausible. It's usually you're talking crap, Sean, what you're on about. Yeah, but I mean, George, I think he's had a great start to the season, and I'm not surprised. I'm more surprised at where Lewis Hamilton is versus what George Russell's doing, because I think George Russell's we've had very, very heated discussions, Dan, off stream. We'll not get into them now about where George Russell ranks versus Lando Norris, for example. Quite a bit of disagreement in there, but I think George Russell's a fantastic driver and a great talent and a hell of a lot of potential still to fulfill, and he's delivering this season. So it was just a theory I wanted to throw out there. But he had a great start today, up to P6, I think it was, off the line. So, all right, okay, a couple of those positions were given to him with Ricciardo and Sainz there, but still gaining some good positions off the line. What else have we got in here? Good battle with Magnussen I've got here as well, which was actually, that was a great scrap. It's come to me now. There it is. What scrap was that, Sean? That brilliant one between Magnussen and Russell. That was fun to watch, but eventually got the move done. And I think he had a fairly quiet race until late on, didn't he, with Valtteri Bottas closing in? I think he had a fairly quiet race, or as quiet as a race is ever going to be. I think is fair, but I've not got a huge amount in my notes, if I'm being honest, apart from that nice battle there. He went in on that move, he went in too deep, went over the curb a little bit, bumped over the curb. I know that what was it? I know they had at the pit stop, they didn't manage to adjust his front wing, so he was driving a car that was basically fully set up for the wet, or as set up as the front wing is going to be for the wet. And therefore he had to kind of drive around that as well. So maybe that explains some of the pace difference at the end of not seeing Mercedes and their press release. That could be why Bottas was closing in, but also Bottas, more on him later. He was pretty damn brilliant today as well. But I think overall pretty spot on for George Russell in a very, Very, very awful car. But I saw somebody chat a minute ago saying that it's still the third fastest car. I'm not convinced there is a third fastest car. I think whoever is the third fastest car, I think that's going to change weekend to weekend at the minute. Probably just me, though.
I even think in the weekend,
Maybe.
We had a McLaren on third on the grid in sprint quali and a Haas fourth, and yet in dry conditions, the Haas seem to be nowhere near the top 4 teams. Alfa Romeo seems to come alive. So I think all the way through this weekend, we had a different, in quotation marks, third best team, which again is great. And just for the record, you made it sound like then that I didn't think George Russell was a good driver.
Oh,
And
I didn't mean like that.
I just need to make that very clear. Yeah. I just made that very clear that George Russell is an exceptional talent and is top 5 on the grid. So, just throwing that out there. But you're right, another really strong drive today. I think he's been one of the drivers of the season so far. Looking at the results he's had in the car he's got, has been pretty exceptional in his first 4 proper races with Mercedes. Slightly fortunate at the start, I think, being able to avoid that contact with Ricciardo, Sainz and Bottas, and was able to make up a few places through that. And I do think, and I don't want to take this away from George because I do think he was blooming awesome today, but I do think if he was in a similar position to Hamilton, just the nature of this track, the nature of the DRS train, it would have been a similar story. So I don't want to say that he smashed Hamilton this weekend. I do think he was slightly fortunate with that start, but you've got to put your car in the right place at the right time. He outqualified Hamilton, had that space on that opening lap, and that's why he's ended up 4th. Drove a really, really strong race and really just deserves what he's achieving so far in the Mercedes this year. Really good start to the season.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting what you say about the kind of it changing over a weekend, but I know that they had some tyre warm-up issues over one lap in qualifying. So in some ways, it's not surprising to see it change in the weekend and see better race pace in terms of Russell, because obviously in a race, you've got more time to get your tyres up to temperature. It's not all down to one lap, is it? So I think that's really helps me today. But yeah, I think he was pretty damn bang on. I tend to agree in terms of one of the drivers of the season. It's difficult, isn't it? Because you think driver of the season, you're thinking world title contenders, but he's had a podium, couple of really strong results. He's definitely on top of that car versus his teammate. And I think he's had a pretty stellar start when it would have been very easy. I mean, he could have come in, couldn't he? And his first season with a team, he could have struggled. We've seen it when drivers make that step up. You know, he could have struggled, but he's not. And I think he's doing a fantastic job, and he did so again this weekend. It would have been interesting what would have happened had he not had the issue with the gun failing at the pit stop, so that he could have actually had the tweaks put in the front wing, the adjustments that he wanted. And I'm not thinking he would have been challenging 7.6 seconds behind Norris. I'm not thinking he would have been challenging, but I mean, at the same time, only 7.6 seconds behind Norris. I mean, that's not bad at all, is it? So yeah, nothing really negative at all to say about Russ. I don't know why there has to be a negative. Just sometimes feel like I have to try and find something so that people don't think I'm being biased. Although I have a British accent and I'm talking about a British driver, so that instantly means that I'm tonguing him. Lewis Hamilton. Oh Jesus, Lewis Hamilton. Where was he today? 13th place. He crossed the line 14th. Ocon got a penalty, which promoted him to 13th place. Pretty damn miserable. Slow. He had a slow stop, I think, as well, which didn't help him. Then had the collision with Ocon in the pit lane, but prior to that, he was not really on the pace either. Got caught in that DRS train behind Albon and Gasly. I will talk again a bit more about it, so I'm going to say this now. Kudos to Alex Albon, in case I forget to say it later. That would have been so easy for them to breeze past in another race, but great stuff. And even when the DRS was eventually activated, couldn't do anything about it because Gasly had it, so pretty damn miserable. But the thing that struck me today was post-race. I have the interviews on while I'm setting the stream up, so I don't always catch it, but I did look across when Lewis was having his post-race interview, and he looks understandably flat as a pancake, doesn't he? He looks so, maybe reality hitting him a bit now that this is not a good car. He said, like I say, that he's not in this championship fight. Toto Wolff saying that, you know, they still are, but Lewis is saying he's not, and he just doesn't look very, very happy. And that's not, that's an obvious statement. Why would he be happy? He's not going to be happy. He's 13th today, didn't have the pace, really difficult start to the season. Actually, no, his start to the season in Bahrain got that podium. It all looked all right. It looked, well, maybe Mercedes can turn this around, but it's just not really gone right from there. George Russell winning out in that team at the moment. I mean, are we surprised that he's deflated? Really?
I don't think so.
No, it'd be ridiculous, wouldn't it? If it was, we'd be absolutely tearing into it if he was coming out going, "Hey, 13th, woo!"
Well, and I think for Lewis as well. I mean, George obviously will be happy with today's result, but in the scheme of George's career, like today's one of his best ever results, like his third best ever result in F1. Whereas if Hamilton's getting fourth, that's a disappointing result. So the peaks of this car, what it's able to achieve on a normal weekend, just isn't the standard that you would expect from Lewis Hamilton. Whereas at least for George Russell, that's a huge jump in front of where he's been the last 3 seasons. So yeah, it makes total sense. Flip the results today. It's Hamilton in fourth. He still wouldn't be happy. He knows the gap to Ferrari. He knows the gap to Red Bull. And with 4 races in, it's not a lot of races to be able to make changes and improvements to the car. But equally, with 4 races in, and Max is, 59 points, Leclerc, 86. I don't want to say anyone's out of the title race at this point, but in reality, it's already closing down to 3 or 4 drivers that are in the fight, and Hamilton's not blind. I don't think anyone's blind. That car isn't great, and even if they are, by some miracle, able to get on top of these issues, they're already a long way behind, and it would have to be another dominant Mercedes season for them to be able to recover from this point. Which, 4 races down isn't a lot, but that's just kind of how bad it's been so far this year. And I don't think really they fully understood why they were out in Q1 in Saudi. I mean, both cars out in Q2 this weekend. That's insane in itself. So, understandably deflated Lewis Hamilton. He wants to be fighting for titles. He's been very open that he doesn't want to be here like in 5 years' time. Doesn't want to be here much longer, in all honesty, is how he's been reporting it to everyone in the last few seasons. So it's disappointing for him. It's disappointing for us as fans, but that's the nature of these regulations. We always knew there were going to be teams at the front and teams that miss out, and Mercedes, unfortunately, at the moment, seems to be missing out.
It would have been, it would be interesting to see where he ended up had he managed to get past Pierre Gasly. I mean, obviously he didn't, so it's kind of irrelevant in many ways, but he got caught behind. There was no DRS, which we will talk about later, I promise. And I will do those couple of super chats in a second as well. But there was no DRS and he couldn't get through. Then they activated DRS and he still couldn't get through. And it just felt like even when he was close, he just needed that little bit, half a car more, or the straight to be just a little bit longer. And I do wonder if the porpoising plays a part in that. I mean, it's got to have an impact. Yeah. I'm not great with the technical stuff, but it's got to have an impact. So it must play a part. But I think... Where was he? So 7/10 off Gasly, 6/10 there. Gasly was behind Albon, who was 4.6. I mean, he might, if he got through, have been able to go and take the fight to Stroll, but he didn't. So it's a point that's kind of irrelevant to make. But I will say as well, something I want to touch on, because the media were absolutely desperate. Yeah, they were so desperate yesterday to make something of Toto Wolff, or was it Friday? Toto Wolff and Lewis Hamilton having a heated conversation. Toto's come out and said they're both frustrated at the same thing. Of course they're I mean, look, I'd be more surprised if Lewis Hamilton and Toto Wolff went to the back of the garage and went, oh, well, these things happen. That, the fine margins in this sport, how important it is when you expect so much from your driver and your driver expects so much from you. Of course you're going to have heated conversations. That's not a criticism of Lewis Hamilton, nor should it be. I'd be more concerned if he got out of the car and went, oh, well, and went back to his motorhome and that's all you saw of him. I'd much rather see that passion from him and Toto Wolff. It's completely normal. So very weird. I mean, quite what, yeah. The media, innit? They're desperate. Some of them are desperate to make something out of nothing. What was it? There was something else the other day. F1 terms that people were trying to really make a big... I can't remember what it was, but they're trying to make a massive fuss about it. And I was like, whatever. It's a nothing thing. But anyway, we'll do those super chats and then we're going to get on to the rest of the field. They're your top 3 teams. No, we've not got to Ferrari yet, but we will do. Please do drop a like. Just over 1,000 people watching, 144 likes. So please do drop a like. Always appreciated. Austin, thank you very much for your super chats. Do you think we see Merc move away from the zero pod design, only team that went that way, and the car is a dog? Do you know, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if we did see them change that, but at the same time, that's a long way off, because that's a massive concept shift. And I think if you are making a massive change like that, you're probably looking at next season and maybe writing this one off. I don't think they're not going to write it off yet. They're a long way off that, but I wouldn't be surprised if they turned up with the hybrid, if you like, that we saw in Barcelona with the older siphons. That'll do. We'll try it, see how it goes. But I mean, it looks awful anyway. And thank you very much to I don't know, just changed my name. Says, first of all, love the streams. Thank you very much. So second is an official policy for enabling DRS in the wet. Seemed weird to see the cars running on a clearly dry track. Was weird. If there is none, should it be considered? We'll get to that later, I promise. But thank you very much for your super chat, mate. Always appreciated. All the links for all of that business in the description down below, as always, as I open apparently 6 tabs for some reason now, and I have no idea why I did it. Let's find out where we were. Where's my notes? Oh, it's all falling apart, Dan. It's because you're back. I'm under pressure now.
Come on, get your act together. People waiting.
Alfa Romeo then. In fact, no, it will be Alfa first, but for some reason the pictures are Haas, so I'm going to scrub through that while we're talking. But Valtteri Bottas, absolutely fantastic today, I think. A lot of people... I've got no Alpha pictures. Valtteri will be livid.
Quick, get through them, quick.
Yeah, Alpha did all right. Haas, no. I'll see if I find something. I don't know where I've put them, so apologies. No Alpha pictures. It's the Bottas hate, I tell you. I can't help it. Absolutely fantastic from him today. I can't fault the guy. Superb. I think possibly not quite enough to nick Russell in the end. I think maybe missing out on a bit of straight line speed. I don't know, but absolutely fantastic. 5th place as well. I mean, that's some hefty points for Alfa. They've come a long way from since last year, and I think you talk about, you know, one of the drivers of the season, Dan. I'm throwing Bottas into that mix as well, because I think he's been superb. And I said it, I think it was last week or the reaction before, is part of this Valtteri going back to a team where he's a team leader, can kind of get on with it himself. Car maybe designed built maybe a little bit more around him, I don't know, but absolutely fantastic. I mean, we always know he's quick. We've always said that on here. For any criticism we've given him, we've always said Bottas is quick. Some of his performance against Hamilton in qualifying, for goodness sake, he had to be quick. But yeah, I think he was brilliant. A lovely move on Magnussen as well is in my notes around at Ravazza. Don't often see moves down there. Do you coming out of the Variante Alta? Nice run down there, up the inside. Great move from Bottas. Pretty faultless today. And I'm kind of... As much as it was lovely to see George take that car to 4th place, I was kind of gutted, I'm not going to lie, at the end, that Bottas couldn't take that P4 away from him, because I think his performances this year kind of deserved that. I want to go and find some Alpha picks.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's a good shout. He's been one of the drivers of the season so far, and Alfa Romeo in general, just the complete change around they've had through these regulations. Like, don't get me wrong, Haas have made a jump, but Alfa Romeo weren't too poor last season. They've had a competitive car-ish over the last couple of years. A car capable of scoring points a couple of years ago. Last year, not so much. But they've not been as bad as Haas have been over the last few years. And yet Alfa have seemed to have made as big a jump, if not more. Bottas 4 points off Lewis Hamilton in the standings so far this year. And Alfa Romeo, I don't think anyone would have predicted that. But you're right. It just seems, and obviously it's really difficult to tell, because even things like Netflix and interviews and stories we hear in the media, you'll never really understand the full picture of what goes on behind closed doors. But for whatever reason, it just seems like Valtteri this year, to me, seems more like the Valtteri we saw at Williams than the Valtteri we saw at Mercedes. Something about, I think you're right, the fact he's a team leader, the fact that he not carries the responsibility of a team, but I think there's a team there that trust him to be the man that's going to score the big points. That's going to be the guy that's in front of qualifying. Something about that just seems to give him that little extra edge, whether that's in terms of just general pace, which you're right, we know he's quick in quali, but in the race, I don't quite know what it is. It just seems that little bit more aggressive. And even today, when the start wasn't brilliant, wasn't horrendous, but wasn't great, with that little front wing damage with Daniel Ricciardo, that could have been game over very early on. To come back from that, to not worry about any sort of damage, and just to keep on plodding through up to what was going to be a 6th place, turned out to be 5th. And like you rightly say, very easily could have been a P4 if the DRS was that slightly bit longer, or that Alfa just had that little bit more juice to go and pass George Russell. Could have been easily P4. And that's got to be Alfa Romeo's best result, I want to say, since Brazil 2019. I want to say, when Raikkonen and Gio were 4th and 5th. But apart from that, their best result in a long, long time. If they could have been P4, but P5 today. So
Yeah.
really impressed with Bottas. Much, much better than he's been over the last couple of years. And just seems at home at Alfa Romeo, which is just really nice to see. And you're right, another driver that deserves a lot of praise today for their drive.
Slow right front at his pit stop as well, which commentary said cost him about 8 seconds. I think the stop was about 11 seconds, so that would have been about right. I said about could Russell have taken the fight to Lando Norris. Well, actually, Valtteri Bottas was 8.2 seconds off Norris at the end.
Wow.
Could we have seen Bottas on the podium? Obviously, again, hindsight, ifs, buts, and all that business. But, if you lose 8 seconds in a pit stop and you're only 8.2 seconds off third place, to be fair, Norris probably had more in the tank. He was probably just bringing it home because there was no point really throwing the car around, was there? But, Bottas, that's how good he was today. It was a pit stop mistake. Ask Antonio Giovinazzi what pit stop mistakes are like at Alfa Romeo. He'll soon tell you they can ruin your day. Superb from Bottas today, and could have been even more. So, and actually, again, without that pit stop, would have been a relatively comfortable 4th place, actually, in the end, at worst. So, brilliant from him. Zhou Guanyu started in the pits. That's all I've got in my notes for him. Look, I think Zhou's done. This is the third one I've said it in a row. I think Zhou's done a lot better than people expected him to do. I think there is a long way to go. Mistake yesterday, which cost him quite dearly in the. I'll say mistake. It was a collision, wasn't it, with Gasly? And I saw some people on Twitter saying it was Gasly's fault, and another saying it was Zhou's fault. I'm not really sure which way to call that, but that cost him dear today. Also, some Parc Fermé stuff going on. They're in breach of regulations there, which meant he had to start from the pit lane. But pit lane to 15th, your teammate's 5th. It's not amazing, is it? It's really not, even from the pit lane, like I say. But I've not got a lot to say on Zhou today because we didn't see an awful lot of him. Except that try and avoid the crashes in a sprint, like the worst possible. We're not talking sprints. I can't be bothered, but it's like one of the worst times to do it is in a sprint race, So yeah, have you got any notes on Zhou?
Yeah.
I guess is what I'm asking you, Dan.
I don't, but I would say, he is a rookie. This is race number 4, his first sprint, which you're right, don't crash in sprint quali. That's quite straightforward. But the first time he's really come into Formula One and handled any sort of wet conditions, I think the fact that, from my memory, I don't remember him having any trips to the gravel, even in that first practice. I don't, unless I'm missing something really obvious. But I think that in itself is quite impressive. And I think 15th on the road, 1 place behind Hamilton from a pit lane start. It's not awful. I think he had a car that was capable of doing better today. And I think the gap to Ocon was quite big, wasn't it, at the checkered flag? So, yeah, that's, of course, room for improvement. But 2 11th places and a 10th so far this year, I think that's pretty good. I think he's put in some solid performances in races. And like we just said with Bottas, he seems to be really comfortable at Alfa at the moment. And I don't think Guan Yu Zhou's that far behind him. And at least I think people were expecting him to be much further away than he is. So, yeah, today, not great, but I don't want to say awful, because those conditions when you've got Leclerc making mistakes, Perez nipping over the gravel, Schumacher had a few spins, I think I can't really fault him that much. You're right. Not brilliant, but not awful. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, I'm gonna give Zhou the same treatment I give every rookie. He's a rookie. It's his 4th race. It was tricky conditions. It's a whole new era. Mistakes are going to happen. Tsunoda made a pretty big mistake at Imola last year himself in qualifying, didn't he? And we saw many mistakes from him last year, but come the end of the season, he was calming down. He got that great result in Abu Dhabi. I think he's had a solid start to this season, Tsunoda, and Zhou might do exactly the same. So I always I try to cut drivers slack anyway for the first sort of third of a season, but certainly rookies. You've got to give them some time, and he's the only one out there, bless him. So yeah, not great, but not terrible. I'm going to move on. There's no point just repeating that because I've got nothing in my notes. When we do Q&A later, if I missed anything on Zhou, please do call it out. Shall we talk? Oh dear, about Ferrari.
I don't think there's a lot to talk about. To be honest, mate. I think we can miss that one.
Yeah, we'll skip over Ferrari then. Not a lot to say. Yeah. I don't know what to say. I mean, it was all looking okay. Third place in a championship fight when you've not got the pace to take it to the front two. It's a decent result. It's damage limitation. It's what he should have done. And then they make a pit stop to go for fastest lap, which, you know, from the racing side of things, I totally get. You know, he wants every point he can get his hands on. He wants the fastest lap. There was enough of a gap back to Norris that he would come out close enough to him that he could get past him. It made sense to go for it. It kind of not forced Red Bull, but it made them think, well, let's get Perez in, and then Verstappen followed, and it allowed them to do that. I mean, maybe force Red Bull in a way because they're worried about safety cars or something like that, or I don't know. But I get it, but it's a silly mistake. It's a mistake that can be made by anybody in those conditions, and I get that. But he's come into that Variante chicane. He's taken way too much curb on the inside, right up on the sausage curb. I think he said it was slippery, and that's part of the reason. So he's gone in there too hot. He's bounced across the curb, ended up in a spin, hit the wall, damaged his front wing, possibly damaged his car a little bit. He said it didn't feel quite right afterwards. So maybe that's a psychological thing because he's hit the barrier, but he wasn't quite sure about it. Just a frustrating mistake. I don't want to call it a silly mistake because, again, it's those conditions that can happen to anybody. But, you know, I don't feel like there was any need to be pushing that hard when it was, you know, he was closing on Perez, but we'd already seen him closing on Perez at one point in that race anyway, and it didn't work that way. Perez made the mistake when he was under pressure, and then, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to say, mate. I'm really, really frustrated with that one because it's kind of it's not hot-headed, is it? Really, it just feels. Leclerc
Feels
does
like it
this.
is.
Yeah, it just feels a bit hot-headed, and it's something that Leclerc does from time to time. Is make these mistakes that you kind of go, why? And it's so easy sat here watching it on TV with my snacks. You know, it's so easy to sit here saying, "Oh God, why has he done that?" I'm not out there racing. I get that, but it's just a frustrating mistake, and I'm not convinced they needed to go for that. But at the same time, again, from a racing point of view, I totally understand why they did go for it because it's points. It's another point on the board. It's another accolade. It's whatever you want to call it. It's like, I get it. I'm not convinced they needed to take that risk. I think third place today, I mean, sixth isn't a disastrous recovery, to be fair, with the amount of time he had, but third place today was good damage limitation, and I do share Nico Rosberg's view. I'm surprised they pitted him straight away for a new front wing. I think they could have maybe left him out with the gap they had, told him to take it easy with a few laps to go, and I think worst case scenario he would probably ended up fourth. I need to see some pictures of the car in the wall, which I'll go and have a look for in a minute on Twitter while you're talking, Dan. But from what I remember, I don't think there was damage, but I don't think there was a huge amount of damage to that front wing, enough that you needed to immediately come in and change it. It's not like Hamilton in Hockenheim, for example, in 2019 when half of the front wing was missing. It's not that kind of incident.
Ooh. You know, I'm not sure I agree. I'm not sure I mean, first up, I think I disagree on both points, to be honest, mate. I think it was worth the gamble on going for the fastest lap. Yes, 1 point, you know, you can argue either way. You can argue that at the end of the season, 1 point can make a big difference. You can also argue that, yeah, it's 1 point. Is that really going to make much difference? So that's one thing. But I actually think by taking that risk of going for the fastest lap, that kind of forces Red Bull's hand, especially with Perez. And I think in that stage where he made the mistake, yes, he was going for the fastest lap, but also he was right on the back of Perez. He managed to close that gap from what was about 3 seconds down to less than a second. So all of a sudden, in a race that was definitely going to be third place, 15 points, turned into a race where he could get fastest lap. That's an extra point. He could get second place. That's an extra 5 points. So I like that gamble. I like that risk. I think that's a risk that was worth taking at that stage of the race because if he didn't overtake him, he's still third place. Nothing to lose. But of course, he did push a little bit too much and was a bit hot headed on that particular corner. But I still think that was a worthwhile risk to take. I also think with the front wing, I don't dislike the take that, you know, maybe they were a little bit hasty, but the nature of where he was on the track in the final sector, he's hit the wall pretty hard enough that I think he's quite lucky that he got away with that mistake. I think also Formula One we see all the time, first couple corners, front wing's fine. We can keep going. All of a sudden, bang, it's underneath the car, or the end plate falls off, and you've got to do a whole lap with half a front wing. and that could have got a whole lot worse. I mean, it's one of those that I'm disagreeing with you, but we will never know anyway, so it's kind of pointless. But I just think in that position where he hit the wall quite hard, we saw earlier on with Alonso the side pod half flying off after a couple of laps of nothing, no damage. It seems okay for Alonso in the early stages. So I just think in that position, get a new front wing. Still, was it about 7 laps to go? I think. New set of tyres, see what you can do. Mistakes already been made. Let's not make it worse, would be my analysis of that situation. But either way, it was, and I would say it was a silly mistake from Leclerc. I think this is something that I think I was slightly nervous about going into this season. That last year Sainz did beat Leclerc, but Leclerc did make that silly mistake in Monaco that cost him dearly. And we've seen the year before, we saw him have a big incident in Monza, kept crashing into Seb, if I remember rightly, in Austria at the top of the hill. And these little incidents that, all right, he was in the midfield, it's going to happen more often than fighting at the front. But just on moments where Leclerc, we know he's got that raw speed. We've seen it countless times. He's got the raw speed, but they do sneak in sometimes. These mistakes so far this year, absolutely not. And I think this is the first one that we've seen so far where you just think, okay, let's just not have any of those. Let's keep cracking on, keep being that consistent driver we've seen so far this year. That was the first one where maybe the pressure got a little bit too much, but mixed conditions. I don't want to be too harsh. He's been really, really strong so far this year, and is definitely still in this championship hunt. But that you're right. That was third place. That was saying an easy third place is never the case in Formula One, but that should have been third, if not second. So yeah, really disappointing from Charles today, and he knows it.
Yeah, I'm just looking at a picture now, actually, screen grab from a replay of it on Twitter. But to be fair, looking at it now, the right side as we look at it left for him, it is a lot more damage than I thought it was. The way it was being described at the time was that it was just a bit of the end plate had come off. But you look at it now, and if you look at the picture on screen now on the right hand side, as you look at it, you've got your 3 elements, if you like, there, and the top 2 are basically completely missing, and you've lost all that end plate as well. So trying to steer that car in damp conditions offline, trying to get that through, maybe that was too much of a risk. And it's in some ways, you know, if you can make that mistake with your car working perfectly fine, then that mistake could happen again, and it could be next time you're in the wall and it's a bigger crash, or you know, you go into a corner too hot, lock it up because you've forgotten your front wing's damaged or something, you end up in the gravel, it's your race over. So in some ways, it does kind of make sense now looking at that picture that I've got. Pitting and then recovering to 6th place is better than not pitting and risking ending up in the gravel and taking nothing away from the weekend. Is maybe the conservative way to look at it. And perhaps actually in a championship fight, we talk about, you know, the fine margins of a championship battle, but maybe we'll look back in a few races time or at the end of the season that 6th place was crucial. And if they come away from this weekend with nothing, they don't win the championship if they were to win it, for example. So that conservative nature, kind of better to take something away from the weekend than nothing. Maybe that's what's played its part there, but makes sense. And somebody in chat saying there that he was apparently struggling to steer left, so that would explain a lot more as well. So definitely the right thing to do when you look at that damage. But and actually it's fair as well, Dan, like you say, we see before, don't we, drivers like, oh no, it feels fine, and then half a lap later they're in the wall or something stupid like that. So it's always better to play it safe. He managed to recover as well, so pretty decent recovery, I think. Just really frustrated to see the mistake, because again, 3rd place today would have been good damage limitation. I think Red Bull just clearly had too much ultimately. A couple of other things from the race as well, though. Managed to pass Norris, to say, after that pit stop. Came back, didn't pass Norris, sorry. Came back through past Tsunoda. Vettel, was he behind Magnussen as well?
Yes, Magnussen was the first one he overtook, yeah. He
got through them pretty swiftly. 12.8 off Bottas in the end, so did it go purple, actually, in the final sector on the last lap. So not a million, actually only a 10th off, roughly. Max Verstappen's fastest lap, so he was still going for it at the end. He wanted that point. He was having that point. Did, obviously, when he made his first pit stop, did initially overcut Sergio Perez, but came out of the pits, tyres much colder. The Red Bull's tyres were much more at its temperature, and he managed to get back through, did Perez. But I quite enjoyed their little battle. I mean, Max Verstappen was gone, but I really enjoyed watching Leclerc and Perez kind of trading fast laps, and I suppose it's always trading mistakes. Perez made his mistake, as we said earlier, so that allowed Leclerc to stay close at times, and I quite enjoyed that. It was quite quite not a tense one, but an interesting one to keep an eye on. You sort of kept looking at the timing screens. Oh, he's closing in a little bit, and then you look back again a few minutes later. Oh no, he's pulled the gaff out again. So I quite enjoyed that one, which goes back to what we said at the start, Dan, about Perez doing the job he needs to be doing as a second driver. So just very frustrating, and it's doubly frustrating when it's Imola as well, isn't it? You see those fans there and the scenes. It's just, it's like if Verstappen crashed out at Zandvoort later this year. It's double frustration, double disappointment. A Ferrari win at Imola would have been incredible, which would have been the first since Schumacher in 2006, of course. That was the last race in Imola before it came back in 2020. So it's been a long time coming. It would have been nice, but it happens. Carlos Sainz. What's happened to my Carlos? What's going on with Carlos? Danny Rick is what's going on with Carlos today. We said it earlier. Neither driver really massively at fault for that. Dan, we both agree. No penalty, just one of those first corner, technically second corner, but first corner racing incidents, damp track, just something that happened. But it just always seems to be happening to Carlos Sainz, doesn't it? He's had that today. Crashed out in qualifying on Friday. Did a good job to get back through, to get back into position for the race. Did that on Saturday, of course, in the sprint. But then you go back and he had his retirement from Australia. Just really frustrated. It's the week of his 2-year deal as well. And it's just, you think, oh, Carlos, what is going to go right for you this season? It is not working. And it did, again, it started quite well, didn't it? Early in the season. I mean, we're still early in the season, but you know what I mean? Just a bloody annoying weekend for Ferrari, quite frankly. I sound like a right Ferrari fan, don't I? I've been crying. That's why the stream was 15 minutes later than usual, because I was just sat crying for those 15 minutes. But yeah, nothing else on Carlos, because that was his race. That first chicane, Tamburello. It was a race to Tamburello for Carlos Sainz, and that was it.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I can add to that, because you're bang on with absolutely everything there, buddy. He did a really good job yesterday, and you kind of hinted to it there. But again, crashing in quali, not great in front of the Tifosi, doubly not great. But fighting back in just 21 laps, plus a safety car in that as well, managing to get up to P4, that was a solid job from Sainz. That's exactly what he needed to do yesterday. And yes, turn one, not his fault at all, in my opinion. Yes, it's a racing incident, and those things do happen, but he was in the right place in terms of he needs to be top 4 now. He needs to be not making silly mistakes in quali. He needs to just build up that consistency that we know of any of the drivers on the grid. One of the most consistent is Carlos Sainz, and I would like to think these 2 races now, back-to-back disappointments. I don't remember the last time he had a DNF before these last 2. So I would like to think he's going to build the rest of his season up from here. The pressures, I feel there's a mixed bag here now, where the pressure's on him to get a result. This is a season where he should be scoring his first victory at some point in the year. This is a season where he has the car, he has the tools to fight for the World Championship. So the pressure's on him from that standpoint, that he's got to get a result. But also I think the pressure's slightly off him in the fact that he is so far off Charles and Max now. He's got a bit of breathing space to just slowly start to build up his season again. Start to catch up with Charles, that we know from last year. He's a driver, he's capable of matching and on his day beating. So he should, in theory, still be in this fight. But yeah, nothing just has gone his way the last 2 Grand Prix. It doesn't quite seem like he's as comfortable with these new regulations just yet as Charles is. But we know how good he is. We know that Chile is a driver capable of fighting at the front. And I'm not concerned. I think just a couple of unlucky races is what I'd like to put it down to.
Yeah, we know he's quick. Like you say, we know he's consistent as well, don't we? So I think he'll bounce back. Different era as well. I think, maybe this era suits other drivers, and I don't know. I think the speed is there for Carlos. It's weird. It's been a weird one for me. I said it last week or week before for Australia, that I find it really odd that he's been so down on himself. He's put performances in where I've gone, not a bad week ever from Carlos, and he's come out and been like really disappointed and talking himself down. You think, oh, come on, Carlos, no, don't do that, because you'll very easily get inside your head with that. And then he is in trouble. But I think he'll bounce back. I have no doubt. Ferrari have given him a 2-year contract, for goodness. They're not going to give him a 2-year contract if they think he's crap, are they? They're not going to do that. Although that's some drivers in the past that they kept renewing contracts for. But let's not get into that one. Going back a long way. But yeah, no, I think Carlos will be fine. Just a really bloody frustrating weekend for him. Frustrating weekend for Ferrari. and one that started so positively. They look like the team to beat. I know practice is practice, but they look like the team to beat after practice. Max Verstappen put in a good lap in qualifying. I think there was a red flag as well, which prevented, probably Carlos Sainz's red flag, prevented Leclerc going again. But, I mean, I might be wrong on that, just to clear that one up. But, you know, he's all right. He's Carlos. He'll be fine. Just stop it with the mistakes, Carlos. Stop putting yourself in the gravel and stop going anywhere near Daniel Ricciardo. It should be said as well, Danny Ric did apparently go down to the Ferrari garage to have a chat with Carlos as well. So he's taken full responsibility for that. I think that's racing incident. But like I said earlier, if the FIA felt they had to give a penalty, you're giving it to Ricciardo, but I don't think that's a penalty. If that happens on lap 10 and it's an opportunity to overtake, then probably Ricciardo does get a penalty. But on the first lap, I'm not. You don't penalise drivers for that. Otherwise, they've all had it, haven't they, really? But we'll move on from Ferrari's disastrous weekend. What I will say, it's opened the championship back up again. Leclerc's still in a very good position, of course he is, but it's opened the championship back up again. Red Bull are right back in it. So to those people after Australia who were turning around to me and saying, oh, Ferrari is so far clear, championship's over, see you next year, not going to bother watching anymore. If you are here, which you will be, because I see it all the time on Twitter, I'm not watching anymore, and then there's the same people the next weekend tweeting. But, you know, those who said it was over, I said at the time, one weekend it can turn. It's not quite turned, but it's certainly come back to Red Bull. So game on. Not to mention the fact it's race 4 of 23. You know, we've got a ruddy long wait. It's going to be a long season, Dan, and a lot of races to come. I think there's 4 in July, 4 races. It's going to be a fun month. But anyway, should we roll on? Sorry, Dan.
Yeah.
Let's roll on to who's next. Is it Yuki Tsunoda by any chance? I think it is Yuki Tsunoda, who I think, as touched on it earlier, had an absolutely fantastic race today, up to 7th place. Started in, I think he qualified okay. Started in 12th, made his way up to 7th place, 5 seconds off Leclerc, nearly 8 seconds up the road from Sebastian Vettel. Yeah, I don't really know what to say. He had one moment, I think, where he's on the grass at the first chicane on the run down to turn 1 at the start, which was quite a nervy moment, I'd imagine. Brown trouser time. I don't know if you saw that, Dan, at the start when it was right on the grass coming down there on the wet grass, but did a good job, Yuki, to keep that one going and drove exceptionally well. Some good overtaking, some good defending. Impressed with him. And as I said earlier, he's one of those drivers after an up and down last year that's come a long way. I mean, look at the difference in just 12 months with Yuki Tsunoda compared to where he was at Imola last year.
Definitely, and I think the obvious comparison with Imola last year is that qualifying mistake, and just all season long he would make little mistakes that had big consequences in quali and in the race, and we're only 4 races down and they seem to have gone. Whether that's just he's used to these new car or he's just calmed down his driving style a little bit. Whatever it is, it seems to be working. And yes, in the races he's keeping it clean, but I think also something that's really surprised me so far this year is how he's been able to match and beat Gasly in qualifying, because Pierre was on fire last year and the year before in quali especially, but Yuki's been right there. I think it's 2-2 in the qualifying battle so far this season, which Yuki was nowhere near last season. So that's a big improvement in itself. Keeping his nose clean is great, but also just his race pace in general seems really, really strong. And that car that was out in Q1, don't forget as well, on Friday to score points comfortably, that's a cracking job. Really impressed with Yuki so far this weekend, but also this year I think is one of those that has just made so much improvement compared to last season. He's doing a great job. And yeah, today, very impressive.
Where are you? I've lost you already. There you go. Built says, Built 2JZ Lexus says, why was he so much faster than Pierre? He was quick today because he had a bit of clear air, didn't he? I mean, Gasly was stuck in that DRS train with Hamilton and Albon, or Albon and Hamilton. So I think that's where Gasly's race fell apart. I mean, I can have a look at the press release and see if they've said anything more specific on Pierre. But Yuki, I think, pretty faultless. But you're right. I mean, quite a surprise after qualifying to see them get knocked out as early as they did. I tried. Do you know, when you have a sprint on a Saturday, doesn't Friday feel like forever ago? or is it just me?
Yeah,
It
I
really
swear that
does.
was a different weekend.
It really does. So I can't really remember, but I don't know if they were caught out by flags or the weather or whatever. But Yuki Tsunoda said, I'm super happy with today, especially to score points at our home track. There are a lot of people from the factory watching the grandstands today. Blah, 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 blah. The pace of the car has been really good. I didn't expect it to be quite that strong heading into the race. I don't think any of us did, Yuki, after Friday. But we've made progress through the week, and I'm pleased with the performance. And Pierre Gasly said it was a frustrating race, stuck in the DRS train. With the top speed, we weren't able to do too much. Had really great performances in quali up until this weekend, where sadly we didn't perform well, which meant we were on the back foot from Friday, which of course is then going to have a knock-on effect into the sprint. Stronger qualifying performance for the next race. Looking forward to Miami. So nothing specific in there from Pierre. Team principal just congratulating Max Verstappen. A lot of praise for Yuki Tsunoda. Just the DRS train, yeah. Pierre struggled a little bit this weekend, and in the race he was unable to pass the cars ahead of him. So the DRS train is what cost Pierre Gasly today. But, you know, that should take nothing away from Tsunoda. Tsunoda wasn't caught in that DRS train. He got through traffic, defended when he needed to defend, and managed to get himself right up there to 7th place in a hefty haul of points. So massive credit to him. Really good drive. And actually, I think it should be said as well, to be starting where they did on Saturday in the sprint, to come through to start 12th as well is pretty good. So I think Yuki's just had, Friday qualifying aside, a very strong weekend, and that's great to see. And, you know, as we said about Guan Yu Zhou or Zhou Guan Yu earlier, you know, where will he be in 12 months' time? You know, these rookies need time, and that's what Tsunoda got. And he seems a lot more. I agree with you. He seems a little bit calmer this year, doesn't he? Behind the wheel. I mean, he has his moments on team radio. I think he was pretty keen to celebrate a couple of his moves, wasn't he, on team radio? But he definitely seems a bit calm behind the wheel. So really pleased to see him up there. But kind of AlphaTauri are one of those teams I'm a little bit disappointed with in the early stages this season because of how good Pierre Gasly was last year and the team was last year. I mean, had Yuki got himself up to speed a bit quicker, they might have even pipped Alpine in the championship. I know we're talking about things a year ago now, so it doesn't really matter. But I expected more from AlphaTauri this year, especially with their close ties to Red Bull. I wondered if there might be a little bit of an advantage to take there within the regulations, of course. But no, but I don't know. I may have been really harsh. But the only notes I've got on Pierre Gasly, apart from DRS train, went to slicks on lap 17.
Yeah. I think that sums it up quite well for Gasly.
Yeah.
He just seems like another one of those that he was caught in that DRS train the whole race. I mean, we saw quite a lot of him. It just, there wasn't a lot happening for him, bless him. And I think he was one of those that got caught out in lap 1, wasn't able to make many moves. Obviously out in Q1 and wasn't able to go forward yesterday after contact with Guan Yu Zhou. So, yeah, I think it's been a slow start for the season for Gasly. He's behind Yuki in the standings at the moment. I mean, how many points? He's got 6. That's okay, I guess. I mean, they're in front of Haas in the standings, AlphaTauri. So that's a slight surprise. But yeah, I don't know. It's a difficult track to overtake Imola. And I think a lot of drivers that we're kind of up to now kind of learn the hard way that that's the case, even with these new regulations.
Thank you very much for the super chat. Phil B says, I want Hamilton to win the next race somehow. Just to silence the haters, Twitter is reaching Silverstone 2021 levels of toxicity. Don't bother with Twitter, mate. Twitter's toxic no matter who's doing what. Definitely don't. My takeaway from Twitter every single time I dare to express an opinion is that Twitter isn't generally representative of the actual popular opinion. It's a very toxic place to be, so I wouldn't read too much into that. But it would be good, wouldn't it? You know, to have a weekend like this for Lewis Hamilton, then win the next race. It'd be kind of like, well, where was that in Imola? But yeah, no, I wouldn't worry too much about Twitter. But thank you very much for your super chat, massively appreciated. Should we go to? Sorry, Alpha Tauri, by the way. Not a lot to say. Let's go to. I took ages to find those photos as well. God damn it. Let's talk about Aston Martin. A little bit higher up this week, which is nice. Double points finish. I think Sebastian Vettel was pretty cracking today as well. I was going to say his best drive of the season, but I mean, duh. We couldn't have got any worse last time, could it really? Pretty shocking weekend for Aston in Australia. So really good to see them in the points today. And I think that he had, for the most part, another one of those that had a relatively quiet race. I mean, for large chunks of it, he was running nicely in 7th place, and it wasn't really until I think Tsunoda started to close down that he had some company. And Leclerc late on as well, coming back through, was about all we saw of Seb. I think, is that a good sign? I often say this in race reactions when I haven't got many notes for a driver. It surely generally means that they've had a pretty solid and consistent race, and it's a good sign, because if it's full of notes, then something's generally happened. So I think Seb can be very happy with that, and it's a good haul of points as well. His P8, 4 points for a team that haven't looked anywhere near the points on pace most of this season. I know, where was it? Was it Australia or Saudi, where I think it was Australia, where Lance Stroll was running long and had an opportunity to pinch a point and then got a penalty which took that away. But on pure pace, they didn't really look like they had anything before this weekend, and then they've come away with 8th and 10th.
Yeah, and even just getting into Q3 in that Aston Martin car. I mean, that's another team that their pace seems all over the place. But you're right. I mean, I think Seb early doors in the race skipped over the chicane, but that's about it. And that's exactly what you want for a team that needed points. I think, of course, being the only team on zero is not great, but just their general lack of pace in the first 3 races was quite alarming. So to get a double score, to get a good finish with Seb, that's more than their fair share of points. That's exactly what they wanted. I think they're aware they're not as quick as your Alfa Romeos, your McLarens, nowhere near your Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari, but to be able to score with both cars, to be able to have a clean weekend, I would say for the most part from most drivers, especially after Australia, where every single session it seemed to be there was an Aston Martin in the wall. That's nice. I don't want to go too crazy, because they would have been a team that would have been, loving to fight for the top 3 in the standings this year, like they've done for the last 4 or 5 seasons in whatever name they have with the team. So, of course, for them, they will be aware there's more work to do from where they want to be. But finally, Seb, I feel this is the first race we've been able to see a representative Seb not racing in the first 2, but then also just recovering from COVID, learning the car for the first time. I don't think it's fair to fully judge him in Australia. So if this is the Seb we can see for the rest of the year, maybe we do have a few more years out of Seb, because I think today was a really good job.
Yeah, and I think, and I've kind of, it's a point I wanted to make, but it's a point I've also kind of stolen from Sebastian Vettel's press release. We have to remember as well that when you look back to the weekend as a whole, they were a team that benefited from the chaos on Friday with the red flags, which enabled them to qualify better. They were a team that also, and I'm going to quote Seb here, said benefited from the cooler and damp conditions on Friday and Sunday. So probably if we'd have had a completely bone dry weekend, maybe Aston Martin would have still been down the back somewhere, maybe struggling. But ultimately, footballing reference, you can only beat what's in front of you. And that, they had the conditions today and over on Friday as well to give them the opportunity to pick up some points, and they took that. That's what they've got to do. If you've got a car that's not very good and you aren't going to be competing in dry conditions or in a standard race, then you've got to be able to have a driver or drivers who can take advantage of that wet weather or those safety cars or absolute chaos in a Grand Prix. They've got to be able to take advantage of that to help the team pick up something from the weekend, if you see what we're getting at. So I don't think, I'm not going to sit here and, like you said, not going to get carried away. I'm not going to sit here and go, this is it, Aston are back, points every weekend. I think it was very specific to the conditions and maybe specific to the track as well. So there you go. I'm not trying to crap on what they've done. I'm not trying to do that, but I'm also not going to start talking about Sebastian Vettel 2022 world champion, although that would be very, very nice. Would be good. And actually, again, back to Seb's statement, sounds like he's retiring, doesn't it? Who knows? But we may not have had the pure pace in this race, but we managed to tie as well, and we got both cars into the point. So even they're accepting there that they've not got the pace. And Lance Stroll saying in his one, let's have a look at what he says. It was a well-earned points for us today because there was intense pressure throughout the race, not to mention the changeable weather conditions. We performed strongly at the beginning of the race. Everyone was battling with overheating tyres and a drying track, but we kept Hamilton behind and pressured Tsunoda ahead. Once we switched to the mediums, we continued to show good pace and pulled away from the train of cars behind us. Happy that he performed better this weekend, or the team performed better this weekend, and made the most of the opportunities that came our way. So both of them very, very clearly saying, look, calm down, Sean and Dan. It's not as good as it looks, but we were given an opportunity this weekend and we took it, which I think both drivers should be given a lot of credit for. 100%. There was one moment I want to talk about for Stroll, though, which I think was incredibly ballsy, actually. Went for a move on Yuki Tsunoda out of Variante Alta, coming down to the Rivazza. He had a chance up the inside, stuck his car in there on slick tyres, got on the wet stuff, but I didn't have my headphones in, so I couldn't hear if he kept it planted, but he looked as though he kept the throttle planted on that wet stuff, on the slicks down there alongside Yuki Tsunoda. That's some brave stuff. That could have gone anyway, couldn't it? That would have been... Oh. So, yeah, kudos to Stroll for that one. I like to see some ballsy stuff like that. But, yeah, sorry to I've bummed you out now. I know you love Aston Martin and their clever strategy sometimes, Dan. I know you get quite excited about that. So I've probably just ruined your entire evening now. But do you see what I'm getting at? I think they're more... Definitely. It's the conditions that have helped them this weekend and the circumstances rather than them suddenly having a belting car. I mean, McLaren have turned it around, but I think Aston are a hell of a long way off turning it around.
Yeah, no, that's more than fair to say. They know they've got issues. I think it's not nice to say, but I think they do have one of the worst two cars on the grid. So to score double points, that's what they needed. They're a team that seem, and you've pretty much summed it up there. They're a team that seem like they need conditions. They need a bit of spice and drama in that midfield to score points. So the fact that they've been able to receive that luck this weekend and convert it to points is, exactly what they need to be doing. But the car isn't great. There's some incredible driver lineups on the grid this year. So if Aston want to be getting points, they've got to be on their A game. Australia was not that, but this time it was. So yeah, you're right. It's going to be a long season for them. It's not going to be a car, I don't believe, that's going to be scoring points on a regular basis. So yeah, good job this weekend, everything considered.
Kevin Magnussen and Haas. There you go. They're the right pictures for you all. I got them right this time. Hey, apparently I can't count. Anyway, don't even pretend you're surprised. You know I can't. Kevin Magnussen, P9 today. Couple of points on the board. Again, back to what I said earlier about that great scrap with George Russell. Had a good start as well, up to 5th place from 8th. Again, a couple of those positions were kind of gifted to him, I suppose, with that incident, but still, good start. Got himself into 5th place. Lovely fight with Russell. More points on the board for Haas. So fantastic from him. And I think another one, actually, and I'm sorry if I say this a lot for some of the drivers, but another one who had, when you look at the timing screens, looks like he had a lonely race in that he was, 4.3 behind Vettel at the end and 16 seconds clear of Stroll. But aside from that DRS train of Albon, Hamilton and Gasly, or Albon, Gasly and Hamilton, every time the camera went to look at a battle, I felt like K-Mag was in it somewhere. I'm sure he wasn't, but it just felt like K-Mag was either just in the background or was part of it or was whatever. But I think certainly in the early phase of the race, I mean, I've loved watching K-Mag this season, and I think he was nice and racy today, so fantastic from him. Couple of points as well for Haas, which, talking about Yuki Tsunoda 12 months ago, couple of points for Haas 12 months ago. Good Lord, they'd have ripped your arm off for that. So good stuff. So consistently delivering there. And Mick Schumacher, other side of the garage, pretty miserable not weekend, but certainly today. Got his best qualifying, I think, or his best starting position. Can't remember what the stat was. So so that's a massive positive for him there. But then at the start, maybe caught out a little bit by what was happening with Ricciardo and Sainz, but got it all wrong. Massive slide on. Rear wheel hit the side pod of Fernando Alonso, which ruined his race. We'll get to that in a moment. Then had a spin at the Variante Alta as well. Just not a very good day for Mick Schumacher to end up 17th. But I think from the team's perspective, it's a couple of points on the board. 10 points clear of Aston in the standings. Only a point behind AlphaTauri as well. So it continues their strong start. But I think when you look at the other side of the garage, there's going to be some real disappointment there. And I'm not surprised to see Magnussen come in and pretty much dominate that team early doors. But I am, if I'm honest, surprised how far Mick is off on a Sunday. I've not got the data in front of me, so I'm not going to commit too much to what I'm about to say, but because I don't really know if they're maybe closer in qualifying, if Mick's a little bit better. I think the battle is 3-1 in qualifying battles, so maybe not. But on a Sunday, there just seems to be a bit much between them, and I'm surprised by the size of that. Not that Magnussen's beating him, because I mean, probably for the 4th race reaction in a row, he should never have been dropped in the first place. But yeah, I expected more from Mick this season, and certainly today from that position. Do you think he was caught out, Dan, in turn one a little bit as a knock-on effect, without making excuses for him, seeing what's going on with science and getting it wrong, or was it just another victim of a wet track, a damp track?
Yeah, from the replay, it just looks like he's got a little bit too greedy on the power, like in the second part of the chicane. I think he's slightly been caught out by the incident on the inside, and I think that's he kind of got his focus on that slightly. He's also slightly trying to think, oh, I can get a few positions here, and again, it's hard because it's only his second season. It's the first time he's been in the car that actually works. So I don't want to be too harsh on him, but it's not great. And I pretty much agree with your assessment. I'm more surprised that Magnussen's been on top. I thought they'd be relatively close, especially with K-Mag having a year out of F1, but he's definitely come back and asserted himself as the team leader. But you're right, on a Sunday in particular, just seems like K-Mag's got that slight edge. And whether that's because K-Mag's used to racing in that midfield a little bit more, we know K-Mag is a ruthless driver. We know he's one of the most aggressive out there. So I think he carries that reputation with him a little bit more, whereas Schumacher doesn't have that. He's still learning the ropes. So, I can cut some slack there, but it's not been a great start to the season for Mick. He's one of 3 drivers not to have scored. One of those, Hulkenberg, who's done 2 races, and the other's Latifi, who's had a bit of a shocker so far this year. So I think he's at a stage now where he needs to build some consistency. He does need to get that point at some stage. And I'm not as obviously my expectations for Haas are ridiculously high. I'm not super happy with this week. Naturally, yeah. Not super happy with this weekend. I think they were aware that they got it terribly wrong yesterday on the medium tyres, and I think Friday those conditions really suited their car. K-Mag in that first into the race did seem to be going backwards, and those tyres did seem, especially the Inters, wear a lot quicker than other cars around them. So, yeah, as a Haas fanboy, points is incredible after the last 2 seasons. But either way, I would hoping for more following 4th on Friday and then K-Mag up into P5 at the start of the race. But that fight with George Russell, that's enough. That had a smile on everyone's faces. So more of that, please. And yeah, Shumi, if he can just clean it up a little bit, I think he'll be on it. Just remove some of the pressure and focus on a good scrap, because he did have a good fight with Seb yesterday, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
So it's there. The pace is there. The ability's there. We've seen it. It's just building that consistency now, and that'll come as we get more used to the season this year.
Yeah, if you've watched Mick Schumacher before F1, you know he's a quick guy. You know he's another one of those young drivers with a bag full of potential. But it's just delivering that in Formula One. It's quite a step up, isn't it? And it's not always something that works out. It doesn't matter how successful your junior career used to be. Oh, stuff. Poor stuff. No. Back to my point. The potential's there. I think he's got the speed. He just needs to iron out mistakes. He spun on his own at the very anti-Alta. People argue maybe he did the same on the first lap as well. He probably did. I need to see some replays, but I tend to agree with you, Dan. Maybe a little bit too hot on that throttle. I got a little bit excited to be alongside Fernando Alonso, understandably. I mean, you're racing Alonso, you're going to have a lot of fun. As Charles Leclerc will tell you. Do you remember Charles Leclerc always seemed to be with Fernando Alonso when he was at Alfa Romeo? And I think George Russell had that last year or the year before as well, where he always seemed to, last year, wouldn't it? Always seemed to be with Fernando Alonso. So you're going to have some fun if you're racing him. Maybe that was what caught Mick out a little bit, like, ooh, this will be fun. But no, I hope it'll come good for him. I will say as well that the difficult thing for him this year is it's not his rookie season, but as you say, it's the first time he's had a car that he can actually compete in. But also, his benchmark last year was a fairly easy one to beat. Whereas this year, there's kind of nowhere to hide, is there? With Kevin Magnussen, he's a whole different breed. I don't necessarily always buy the experience thing, because Magnussen is a massive experienced driver versus Mick Schumacher, but Magnussen also had a year out of Formula One. But Lewis Hamilton's a massively more experienced driver than George Russell, and Sergio Perez is actually a pretty heftily more experienced driver than Max Verstappen. So sometimes it's a talent level thing as well. It's not just about experience, but of course that's a factor in it all. I just gave example. Max Verstappen world champion, incredible talent. Well, Perez is more experienced, but you get my point. But I'm sure it'll come good for him, and I'm just pleased to see Haas get some points on the board. It's great to see. Alpine, well, where were they today? Not great. So Fernando Alonso clunked by Mick Schumacher in that first corner. That left damage to his side pod. And then a little bit later, that all came flying off. Massive hole in his side pod. That was just end of his race, and he was slow. He was losing speed. Ended up just didn't have the pace. No aero. It's ruined the car. Came in the pits. I think the team did maybe look at it a little bit, see what they could do, but no way you're repairing that. That was game over for Fernando Alonso, which is a shame because I think we might have seen something from him today in these conditions. I think he would have been pretty strong, but we'll never know now. Esteban Ocon, I think was going okay, but had a crash in the pit lane. Well, I say crash, it was more of a collision, a bump, whatever, with Lewis Hamilton. He was released into the path of the Mercedes and they made a bit of contact. Hamilton had to back out of it. That resulted in a 5-second penalty for Ocon, and that kind of, I don't remember seeing an awful lot of him either in the race. And obviously at the end of the race then, I think, was he 11th? And then got demoted to 14th. So on the fringes of points, but of course with a 5-second penalty, you're just going to go backwards in that tight midfield, aren't you? So maybe points were never on today, but just a bit of a rubbish one for Alpine. And I'm trying to think, where's this? I can't find the standings now. Where are they? So they're 6th in the standings, 22 points. I mean, it's been an okay start in terms of picking up points, but I expected more from this weekend. And I think I'm more disappointed, like I just said, Alonso getting knocked out early. These are the kind of conditions that kind of driver, that kind of experience in these conditions. I think he could have had a really good day today. So it's kind of a shame that it all fell apart. And I like watching Fernando Alonso in those conditions in a bit of a mixed up race. I enjoy watching that, so kind of gutted that he couldn't turn that into a result today, but not his fault in the slightest. He was just very unlucky, as Fernando can be on the first lap. I'm trying to think back to other incidents. I think there was Stroll, wasn't there? At Kota one year was the Baku where he was sandwiched by two drivers and got clunked. Mm-hmm. It's just a first lap thing for Fernando. Sometimes they're brilliant, other times he just gets caught in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah, he's just not getting the luck at the moment, is he? Last time out in Australia, you felt all weekend long he had a car that he was able to score good points with, but just never really materialised. And this weekend, I mean, at least last time he managed to get to the checkered flag. A lot of bad luck along the way, but at least he got to the checkered flag. And today, that bit of contact, that wasn't his fault at all. It's not really Schumacher's fault either. It's him spinning and Alonso can't get out the way. So that's unlucky in itself. I think the fact that the side pod held on for a few laps and then decided to fly off is even more unlucky for Fernando. And yes, I mean, the car didn't seem particularly quick this weekend, but he still got into Q3. He still did a good enough job yesterday in sprint quali. So I think he's been one of the most unlucky so far this year. He's got a good car. Ocon's scored points in every single race so far, apart from this one. So it just seems like one of those weekends for Alpine, doesn't it? Where we didn't see them a lot, but also not a lot of good things seem to be happening for them. So they'll move on. But yeah, weekend to forget, I think, for Alpine.
Cited Canvas saying actually in chat, was Ocon even in the race today? He suffered from the old Carlos Sainz syndrome today, didn't he? Cameras weren't interested. Didn't see much of him. Yeah, I've got nothing else to add on their weekend at all, really, from Alpine. What else have we got going on? Who have we got left to go through? So we've got Williams. I believe that is. It is indeed. Alex Albon. A little bit of a back down to earth with a tiny bump this weekend after his Williams' incredible strategy play and the way he managed to deliver that in Australia. But I still think P12 is a very solid result today. Sorry, P11, for Alex Albon is a very solid result. Obviously promoted there after the penalty for Ocon, but he was only 4.5 seconds off a point, and I think he did. And I think it has to be said, because it's not all about throwing one up the inside in Formula One. It's not all about these banzai moves. What he did today to keep Gasly and Hamilton behind, despite the fact both of them had DRS, I think was pretty solid stuff. Under pressure, he could have made a mistake. It would have been easy to make a mistake under that pressure, and I think that obviously the straight line speed was pretty good in the Williams today, and I think the fact that straight was a little bit shorter than it needed to be probably helped him as well, but I still think he did a very good job to cling on to 11th place, and of course, 11th place. All it takes is one driver to stick it in the wall ahead, and he's picked himself a point again. So he's probably done about all he could have done. So I've been impressed with Alex Albon in the last 2 races. I must admit, I know if you watched when I was on Tomo's podcast, I maybe wasn't quite so glowing in my opinion of Albon. I don't dislike the guy, and I don't think he's a bad driver at all. But I don't quite get on the hype train that a lot of people do with him. But I've been really impressed with him in the last couple of races, and I think deserves a lot of credit for that one. So it's kind of the only thing I've got in my notes, and I did well to hold off Gas Ham.
He did. You're not wrong. Yeah, they don't have a good car, so to be anywhere near the points is a great job. And like you, I wasn't fully convinced he was the best choice for this year, but I think already I'm happy to say I've been proved wrong. He's had a really strong start to the season, been demolishing Latifi in every single session. And I know Nicholas having a difficult time at the moment, keeping it between the white lines, but also just finding pace with these new regulations. He really does seem to be struggling,
terrible, isn't he?
Maybe
this season.
Yeah. He's not having a good time of it, is Nicholas, is the polite way of putting it. But yeah, it's been pretty terrible. Didn't crash today though, as someone said earlier on. So improvements, we shall say, on that side of the garage. But Albon's been strong. I've been impressed. Like you, I feel I've been silenced a little bit on that side of things with Alex. And today, you're right, holding off Gasly and Hamilton. That's great in itself. But just being in a position to be anywhere near the points just seems like a really, really good performance from him. And yes, I know they've taken off most of the blue on that car, and that's probably saved half a millisecond of speed. But yeah, it just seems like though Williams don't have a great car, they've got a driver in Albon, and like you say, last time in Australia, they seem to have strategists that are happy to go bold, happy to try things different. And it doesn't seem like, though they've got what seems to be the worst car this year, it doesn't seem like they're completely down and out. And it does seem like they've got a package that will be able to score points, maybe not huge points, but on multiple occasions this year.
I try to think of a way to disagree with you on that one.
But I don't think they're going to be scoring points every single weekend. Like if they scored points twice more this year, is more what I'm thinking. But it's not bad enough. Whereas when it was Russell and Kubica and they were laps down, or Haas, it's not a dreadful car.
No. What I mean is I'm trying to find ways to disagree with you because people often think we agree too much, Dan. So your opinion's crap, mate. What are you talking about? No, just on Alex Albon though, says it's a shame we missed out on points by one place, but we are taking opportunities, doing things differently, and showing that we can battle higher up. Despite not having the fastest car. I was hoping DRS would be enabled. We are getting to DRS, I promise. A little bit earlier, we had 6 or 7 laps where we were faster than the cars ahead, and with our downforce levels, we could have got past straight away if we'd had DRS. So Alex Albon actually speaking quite positively there about the car's pace, which is fantastic to see. On the other side of the garage, Nicholas Latifi, definitely a very tricky race, and I think everyone expected that when we saw the rain coming down ahead of going into the grid, all the usual PR spiel you'd expect. It was important for me to get that experience and continue to build my confidence in the car. I'm not going to say much on Latifi because it very quickly, as we got last year with Mr. Maz, it very quickly goes from criticism to a bit of bashing, doesn't it? And I don't think that's fair. But he's not been good. It's as simple as that. 3 crashes in 4 weekends. Not really. 2.6 off show. 17 seconds clear of Schumacher, who had problems. It wasn't a great race. I mean, we didn't see anything of him as well. I think that's another reason with Latifi I don't like to say too much because I don't want to bash him because we don't see anything of him. So he could have driven beautifully in that car, but he's having it handed to him by Albon, isn't he, at the moment, that's for sure. Thank you very much, Charles Edward Cheese. Good to see you left it late today. You're normally here before I am. Thank you very much, mate. Always appreciate your incredibly generous contributions to the channel. Always appreciated. No message today, so I'll do it for you. I've got this down to a T now. 269 likes, 844 of you here. Let's see if we can get that to 500 likes for Charles for that $500 contribution. Thank you very much for that, Charles, once again. So let's try and get that to 500 likes. It's a bit of an ask with it being just over 800 watching, but I think we can get somewhere near that. Let's see if we can do it. So please do drop a like. Don't forget to subscribe as well if you are new. Lots of content coming up, and of course Miami next, which I'm looking forward to. But next up, driver of the day. One surname, chat. Let me know your driver of the day. I will read a few out as always. I think this is actually... I think there's quite a few nominees for this one, Dan. It's a tough one, but it's also very difficult to ignore the obvious. Max Verstappen won driver of the day, officially, but who are you going with this week?
Well, don't worry, Kimi Räikkönen's gone now, so since the last time I did a race reaction stream, like, I can't go for him anymore. So I've always said, though, you know, they're not always the most exciting races when someone gets a Grand Slam. A Grand Slam's a Grand Slam, and you know, I'm not quite sure on a technicality of if it was this weekend or not, because sprint qualies, it's a whole own thing. But Max Verstappen to dominate a race in the fashion he did, in the conditions that there were, and to just be so in control of the car all weekend long, I've got to give it to Max. I've got to stick to my guns with what I always go with. Grand Slam is such an incredible achievement to get in F1, and again, to do it on a track like this as well, it is no easy task. Yeah, really impressive Max this weekend. I think a mature drive from a world champ. I think a champion's drive, I think, today is from Verstappen. So, yeah, slightly boring answer maybe, but yeah, Max for me.
No, I think that's fair. I mean, I Verstappen was my pick because I gave it to Leclerc for exactly those reasons. A Grand Slam, a faultless weekend. So if I was on my own again this week, I would pick Verstappen, but because you've picked him, I'll pick somebody else. I'm tempted by Norris. I'm tempted by Russell, but I'm going to go with Bottas. Do not adjust your set. Sean's picking a Bottas. I know.
Now, can I just say, last time I picked a Finnish driver for Alfa Romeo, I got abused. So
yeah, but that Finnish driver did sod all race, and I think you were just doing it to troll me at the time. I'm going to say Bottas just because, you know, I don't pick him enough, and I think he was very good today. And I think without that slow pit stop, I think he had a shot at the podium today. And I think if he'd done that in the Alpha, that chat would be full of Bottas. And I think you'd have probably gone with Bottas as well if he'd have done that one Grand Slam or not. So yeah, I'm going to go Valtteri. Let down by his team today with that pit stop error, but there's, you know, Tsunoda deserves a nod, Vettel deserves a nod, Russell and Norris absolutely do. I think Perez does as well. I think it's a lot of candidates this week, which is nice because sometimes it's easy and you just go, well, obviously it's the guy that went from last to second. So it's nice to have a few candidates this week. So let's have a look at what you guys are saying in the chat. Wing Racer says Norris. Gurgley's Technic Models says Bottas. See, not just me. Carmen says Bottas as well. Ava Moore says Vettel. Frithman says Russell. Jack's gone with Vettel. Cravone says Verstappen. Lucas says Verstappen. Nicky's gone with Bottas. Ryan says Norris. Katie's gone with Checo. Frederick says Vettel. Raul says boring, like you, Dan, but Max. Purple Zebra says Russell. David says Lando. Arsenic says clearly Max. Livo says Vettel. The IGPU gamer says Seb driver of the day. Sandro's gone with Bottas. Johnny says Verstappen. Jordan says Lando Norris. I don't know why I'm flying through these like this. Two left feet says Yuki. Tell me about it. Two left feet. Panos says Russell. Adam says Vettel. Josh has gone with Checo. Aiden says the cool down room for driver of the day. Oh, so pleased to see that back. Oh, I've missed the cool down room. Loved it. No torpedoes. No multi 21 Seb or whatever, which by the way, Seb did the right thing. Let's not get back into that one. DeWeber says Lewis. Glenn says Vettel. Bottas for Ajit. Sassy Lemon Cake, cracking name, says Vettel. The Slip says Perez. Pascal says Valtteri. Kunnel says Norris. Paul says Kubica. There's always one. Let's do 5 more then. So Mary says Russell. K Diggy says Russell as well. The Pixel says Yuki, possibly already read that one, but I've done it again. Sighted Canvas says Bottas. J Starship says Bottas. And I will do one more that isn't one that we've already had, but is serious. Let's see who. I think I've said Tsunoda, so we'll not go with that one. I don't. Quite a few Perez in there, Vettel, Norris. It's a good mix, Dan. It's a good mix in this chat, which is good to see. There you go. It's not serious, but I'll give it anyway. Blubberwasser says Latifi. I mean, we didn't see him. He could have done something incredible, and we'd never have known.
That's probably his best race of the season so far.
I mean, finished.
Yeah, it's not an awful shout.
Let's leave that one there. As I say, please do drop a like. Let's see if we get to 500 for Charles Edward Cheese. Don't forget to subscribe as well. If you've got any questions, pop them in the chat, definitely, and we'll answer a few of those for a few minutes. If I missed anything in the race that I must talk about, please let me know as well. But we've got to talk DRS, Dan, because that seems to be the thing that everyone's kicking off about, which is quite funny because yesterday there was a lot on Twitter, and I know you shouldn't always pay attention to Twitter, I know that, but there was a lot on Twitter saying, oh, the only thing good about the sprint was that we had DRS overtakes, and DRS overtakes are rubbish. But then today, all Twitter was full of was, where's the DRS? We need DRS. We need DRS. It's like, make your mind up. It's either crap or it isn't. But anyway, I think some people just made their mind up about the sprint, and that's it, quite frankly. So no point debating that, which is why I'm not going to get into it. Might be a video next week on it, though, just to put some of my thoughts across. But on DRS, it was a really weird one because we've seen DRS enabled in much worse conditions than that. So I was quite surprised how long it took. And I think it was finally enabled around lap 38. I did put it in my notes. I probably ought to check that. But I think it was around lap 38. And then I kind of put underneath it that I think it could have probably, based on the precedent we've seen before, you could probably have activated that around lap 15. It was lap 34, sorry, it finally got activated. So it probably could have been activated 20 laps earlier. Again, if we look at the precedent that we've had before with these conditions. So I was really surprised at how long it took for that to get activated. And I don't know, a lot of people say it was detrimental to the race. And in some ways I agree. And, Alex Albon saying with DRS he could have done better. And some other drivers will probably say the same in their press releases. But when DRS was enabled, nothing changed between, say, Albon, Gasly and Hamilton, for example. That train just became a DRS train. Nothing changed. So I'm not entirely convinced it would have blown the race wide open. There's a couple of things that would have happened. I think Leclerc would have had a better shot at Perez, and Albon would have been able to maybe get some positions as well. So maybe earlier in the race, if it was activated on lap 15, it would have been a different story. But by the time we got to lap 34, it made no difference whatsoever, is what I'm getting at, Dan. So I was quite surprised by that. And the only thing I can think as to why race control decided to wait so long was just because of what happened last year with Bottas and Russell on a drying track on the run down to that first chicane, because that was a nasty accident and they don't want to see that again. So maybe they were just erring on the side of caution a little bit.
Possibly. I quite like that theory. I think that could be pretty close to it. But, I mean, again, this is a brand new structure of race director as well, and this is the first time we've seen changing conditions mid-race and enabling DRS, so maybe they were being slightly cautious. I think I'm in the camp that I think if you're on intermediate tyres, you shouldn't have DRS. Because if you're on intermediate tyres, then it's obviously not dry enough for dry tyres. There you go. There's your quote of the day. So in that instance...
He's a genius, isn't he, guys?
Yeah.
Dan's an absolute genius.
I know. That feels like a Will Buxton Netflix kind of quote. But for me, if you're on inters, it's... by that logic, you shouldn't be able to have DRS because it's not safe enough to be on the dry tyres. That's my thinking. So I think Crofty and DeResta were a little bit too eager for my personal taste and when I'd like to have DRS, because, again, if you're going to make a move with DRS, you're having to go off that dry line onto the damp line. That and DRS, if anyone's played the game and has DRS through a corner, that's not pretty in the best of times. So that, I was thinking, in my personal opinion, that was a little bit too early when they were saying maybe lap 12. But lap 35, 34 was way too long. The track, most of it was dry by that point. So I'm not fully sure. I don't think anyone's fully sure why they decided to take so long in making that decision. But it was a nice test in hindsight. I think, knowing now that it didn't make a lot of difference when we got to the checkered flag and that DRS train, that was a train beforehand, didn't really change. Knowing that didn't change afterwards, it was good that we tried it without DRS. We've now seen the best of both worlds. We've seen that DRS, it can be helpful, especially if there's one cars. But if you're in a group, that's not really going to make a fat lot of difference. So, yeah, I suppose worth a try in hindsight, but you can't be waiting that long. because that was detrimental to a couple of drivers' race today. And that's not really fair when you go into a race knowing that DRS is going to be a feature and then it's not allowed to be used for no really strong reason. So yeah, a funny one for F1, but first time race directors have been in that position, so hopefully they will learn, is my thinking from that.
Yeah, like I say, I think it's a couple of people in chat kind of agreeing that maybe just because that it's not a straight, is it? So it's not like a Bahrain or wherever where you've got a long straight with lots of runoff. It's grass, and it's maybe they just thought the risk wasn't worth it and they didn't want a massive accident. But it's an interesting one, because I do think that if that DRS comes into play earlier in the race, maybe it would have mixed things up. But when it came in, it didn't really change an awful lot. But what I will say is it did show us, and maybe I'm being overly optimistic, but it did show us these cars can follow. These cars can get close, and for some drivers, not a lot of overtakes, but we did still see overtakes happening. Had DRS been enabled, would Bottas have made that move down to Ravazza? Probably not. So we got to talk about that fantastic move from Valtteri Bottas. Had DRS been enabled, would Lance Stroll have taken that chance, which didn't pay off against Yuki Tsunoda, but could have, and would have been an absolutely incredible move. And we've been waxing lyrical all week about Lance Stroll and how brilliant that was. So we got to see some overtaking without, I know quicker car, but Charles Leclerc passed Lando Norris without DRS earlier in the race. So we got to see some racing without it. And I don't think the race was hit too hard without DRS at that stage, I mean. So it was an interesting experiment, I guess is what I'm getting at. And the cars can follow close, and it shows that 2022 is working to a point. But I don't think it's going to be something we see every week. I think if you don't enable DRS somewhere... I was going to say somewhere like Monaco. I mean, you don't see bloody overtaking with DRS in Monaco. But you know what I mean? I don't think it'll be the same on every track, because two tracks are very different. And I think that if and this would have been, crazy, but imagine if we had these conditions in Bahrain. First of all, what the hell is happening? But also, with that longer straight, I think we'd have seen more passes without DRS, because they'd have had... We kept seeing, didn't we, cars getting close, and then they just did a little bit more straight, and it's not quite enough. So if you'd have had DRS, that's what I mean by it might have changed things. But if you have a longer straight without DRS, maybe those moves are getting done. So I don't think it had the detrimental effect that, for some reason, Crofty and Paul di Resta decided it did. For ages they were banging on about, where's the DRS? We need the DRS. Like, chill out, guys. Normally you're telling us we don't need DRS, or, oh, wouldn't it be great to see some proper overtakes? And then we get them, and they're moaning without DRS. I don't think it didn't really make a difference. I mean, I'm sure there were some overtakes we didn't see that did happen because of DRS, of course, but I don't think it affected the race. And maybe that's because the field, like I said earlier, 3 times now, because the field spread was so big by the time DRS was activated, there wasn't going to be much of a difference. But I don't know. I don't think it was as bad as was being made out, but we're going to need it for Miami. We're definitely going to need it for Barcelona. Please, God, just make the whole of Monaco DRS. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it was worth the fuss that some people were kicking up. And again, like I say, it's a little bit weird that Saturday people were moaning that DRS was too powerful and it's rubbish and that's not what F1 is. And then today people were screaming for DRS. It's like, yeah. Was that because it was the sprint that people were just kind of like Debbie Downers about it? Because I think, like I said, Dan, I think that's a few people with the sprint are very much like, it's rubbish, don't want it, not interested, and you're just not going to change their mind. So, and for the record, I don't think the sprint was that bad. What I would say on the sprint, again, I'm not getting into it. I don't want to discuss it because I can't be bothered to argue with chat and I can't be bothered to argue with you, Dan. But what I would say is that of the 4 sprint races we've had, the 2 that have actually been okay were Brazil, when a car was out of position, a fast car was out of position, and Imola, when fast cars were out of position. Let's reverse the grid on a Saturday. Anyway, what are you guys saying in chat? That's me cancelled. I'm done. Sighted Canvas says, would we get the same if they did this in Baku? Regarding the DRS. It's an interesting question, actually, isn't it? Because that's arguably as dangerous as Imola, isn't it? It's a longer straight, more high speed. Walls closer, so if you've got a damp track in Baku, you don't really want to be making that risk. But if you talk about overtaking, which now it just comes to me, you're probably thinking that. I think we would have seen more overtakes at Baku in these conditions without DRS than we saw today. definitely, because I think you've got more time, haven't you? Do you know, actually, Baku will be an interesting one, Dan, because we keep talking about how these cars can follow more closely through those fast corners in that final sector. We're really going to see, aren't we, how close they can get, and that's really going to show on the Sunday in the race. So that's going to be a fascinating one to keep an eye on. But I tend to think with that long straight, we'd have seen more overtakes. It's maybe an obvious statement, like properly dumb obvious.
No, because I think you're right. I'm trying to think of the second DRS zone as well. I wonder if that would have also made a difference as well. Yeah, I mean that's technically the longest flat out section of the calendar, isn't it? Sector 3 of Baku. So yeah, I'd definitely like to think that you don't really need DRS flying down that part of the track. And also in the past when we've seen safety car restarts and there's been no DRS, they've been able to make overtakes, and that was in the last generation of cars that couldn't follow anyway. So yeah, I think Baku you would have seen a few more overtakes.
It'd be interesting to see, definitely. Crofty and Duresta always complain about something. Honestly, something that gets on my nerves, says Crevone. I just found it a little bit silly today because I think it was an all right race without it, definitely. But who do you think will be suited to the Miami track, says Adam Osborne. I mean, look, I'm sorry, Adam. Obvious statement alert. I think we are looking at a Red Bull Ferrari weekend, definitely. So it's going to be close again. But I'm sort of looking at Saudi Arabia. There wasn't a lot to choose between them, was there, in that race? But I'd argue Red Bull. I know they won the race, but in terms of outright pace, I think Red Bull just had the edge in Jeddah. I don't know. I don't know much about the Miami chat. Let me see if I can pull it up on my one of my other screens. See if I have a look at it, because I don't really know a lot. I'm trying to work out who it might suit, but I think, like I say, obvious statement is it's going to be close. But what on earth is that?
It's very Jeddah-esque.
Jeddah meets the drawing my niece did for me the other week, which I think was supposed to be a fish, by the way. She didn't say. Could have been a cat. I'm not entirely sure. Could have been me. I don't know. Random. Yeah, it's got the long straight, hasn't it? So that's. I think Red Bull seem to have some pretty good straight line speed, so that's going to pay dividends there potentially. Between 16 and 17. See, the start-finish straight's quite short. Do you know? I'm going to say Red Bull. There is a lot of Jeddah in that, isn't there? In some areas. So I'll say Red Bull. And away from that, God knows. Wow. I've not looked at that track properly, which is maybe an oversight on my part. That's a good-looking one. Raul says it has a back curve. It does indeed. How many laps is the Miami Grand Prix going to be? Says Adam. That's a good question as well. 57. Sorry, Dan.
No, that's right. No, I was just agreeing with you. It's one of the more unique looking tracks, I would say, because it definitely feels like it feels like Jeddah in that the majority of the lap looks flat out, but Sector 3 definitely looks a lot more tight and twisty than any of Jeddah. So yeah, I agree. Red Bull. This seems like a track that should suit their car, but I mean, I don't think it's that easy to tell this early on in the season. I mean, Mercedes really struggled in Jeddah, didn't they? So it's going to be another one they struggle at. Haas did awful in Jeddah. And then, I don't know. I think it's so difficult to tell at this point, but you know what? I'm going to say Ferrari only because they had such a bad weekend this weekend and they will want to bounce back. And also, they were quick in Jeddah too. It's
yeah. There wasn't much in it, was there?
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I'll go Ferrari just to be different.
Yeah, I mean, it could also depend on the updates, couldn't it? I think Ferrari they've got a flaw that they want to bring, but they didn't bring it this weekend because limited running on Friday, obviously, and then the rain possible as well. So we might see a new flaw from Ferrari in Miami. Could be updates there, and if they bring a big package of updates, then we might, they might get the edge over Red Bull. Equally, if Red Bull bring a massive pack of upgrades, they could suddenly be a bit clear of Ferrari. But I think we'll see more updates in Miami than we saw in Imola. But a couple of teams, it's a big weekend for McLaren and Red Bull, and so a couple by three. Haas, because obviously Red Bull have got their big American tech sponsor, haven't they? Zach Brown always makes a big fuss about the American races for McLaren, obviously, and the whole IndyCar link there as well. But you've also got Haas, American team again now, tongue in cheek. But I think it's a big weekend for them three. So I'm hoping for a really good weekend for Haas and McLaren. It'd be great to see Red Bull versus Ferrari round 5. Are we counting Australia? Did we count today?
Yes.
It's not as good as it was in Saudi and Bahrain. Honestly.
True.
We'll see, of course. But you're looking forward to Miami. I know we've got a couple of new tracks this season.
I cannot wait for Miami. That's my one I'm most looking forward to this season. Even though it's a street track and the layout is something. I just a race in Miami. I'm also a big NFL fan as well, so that's going to be a big theme throughout the weekend. So I just think it's going to be one of those races that on track should be fun, but also is one of those ones that the atmosphere away from the track is going to be pretty awesome, which you don't always get at every single circuit. So yeah, just any new venue. I feel we've been spoiled over the last few years, and I think Miami's going to be a lot of fun.
I got muddled up there. We haven't got a couple of new races this year. We've got a new race and then a load of returning races. That's what I'm getting mixed up with. We've got Singapore back, Japan back, which you know you'll be devastated about, Dan. We've got what else have we got back? It looks like
Canada.
Yeah, Canada's back. There's the possibility that Qatar will take the Sochi spot, although apparently that's looking more likely to be a double Singapore now, one in the day and one at night. So
we didn't have Spa last year.
Yeah, Spa didn't count last year.
Spa didn't happen last year.
Ajit says, I can't wait to see the fake marina with the real yachts. Oh, I've seen that. I'm not quite sure how they're going to get them in there. I assume they're just going to lift them in with cranes, but that's a little bit ridiculous, definitely. Who else? A couple more questions before we wrap up for today. I did see one, but I think it's been removed. So we've got Livo says, do you think races that were boring in the past, like Spain and France, will be more interesting considering how the new cars are able to follow? I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful for Spain because we got a little bit of testing this year, but not a huge amount because it was more of a shakedown, although it was a test, but not really a test. So it's not like they've got a huge amount of data like they would normally have arriving at Spain because the regulations have changed so much. So I'm hopeful for it, but I'm not. I'm very pessimistic about Spain, not the country, the race. Barcelona, Circuit de Barcelona, generally speaking, I don't think it offers up great racing. So, but I'm hopeful that it will. France, I'd be honest, I'm hoping that it's poorer cars last season on the calendar. But, I mean, in theory, if the regulations work the way that they should work, Dan, and if things continue positively as they have this season, then there's no reason why Spain and France, for example, won't be better than we're used to seeing. In theory.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like the last two races at Imola were really, really good, but that was more due to circumstance of big events happening. Whereas I do think that this year's race, though we had Sainz go out early on and Leclerc have his moments, I think the actual racing was better in that we did have that train all the way through. There was always action. There were always cars close to each other. So from that, I would, yeah, I'd like to think your Paul Ricard's Suzukas are going to be half decent races. I'd like to think, but then I also think Monaco's going to be Monaco, because you're always just naturally going to have to leave a gap and room for error for drivers around you, and overtaking. It'll be easier, but it's not easy to overtake around Monaco. So I think there'll be a couple, especially street circuits, that will be similar. But I actually think racing venues like Barcelona will be. I think they will be better.
I go back to what I said the other Wednesday, actually, with the stream I did with Jonty. It's surprising as well how low Silverstone is down on average overtakes. So maybe that will be better as well. So, you know, there's a few in there that we all call favourites and that people love, but actually they could do with maybe will benefit from these new regulations. I mean, Monaco will Monaco, won't it? I mean, what can you say, really? You could have I was going to say a badger race, and I'm not quite sure what a badger race is, but you could have a badger race around Monaco and it wouldn't be all that entertaining. What the hell is a badger? A race of badgers, I assume. But
Honey badger.
That would have been really weird. That's not the fun. I mean, Ted Kravitz had me in stitches pre-race, by the way, when he, what did he call? Oh, what did he call? He called Daniel Ricciardo the test gerbil or something, didn't he? Instead of the honey badger. It's like, what the hell's a test gerbil, you idiot? Anyway, sorry, I just find him really... Ted just cracks me up, whatever he does. Adam just wanted to know when the first teams are going to run their young drivers in FP1 this season. At least 2 sessions are required. I actually don't know. I know the only thing I do know that I've read this week about young drivers is that Robert Schwartzman, when he gets his time with Ferrari later this year, he'll be racing under an Israeli license. Because he was born... Do you know, I didn't know he was born in Israel.
Neither did I.
No, he was born in Israel. So he's gonna be racing under an Israeli license, which is all I've seen. But if I see anything, Aidan, I'll let people know on Twitter. But I'm not sure. I'd imagine, if I'm going with a hunch, I'd imagine for most teams it'll be later in the season when they've got a little bit more knowledge of these cars, a bit more practice under their belts, and they've got the developments that they want on the car's early doors, because you really do need your 2 race drivers in there when you're putting new parts on the car every weekend. So they might hold off on that for a little bit, but that would be... He was born in Israel and raised in St. Petersburg. There you go. Did not know that. Sorry, that's
pretty cool.
Sorry, Aidan. That really took on me on a random... I've blocked the bots, don't worry, I'll keep blocking them. They just keep coming back. I don't know why they think I'd be interested in that. Absolutely terrible. How many more times will Verstappen lap Hamilton this season, says Johnny White. Hamilton fans and Lewis Hamilton will be hoping never again. I just hope that... I mean, George Russell's showing the speed in that car, isn't he? So I still think if Hamilton had cleared that DRS train, then maybe he'd have been in the points, but he didn't, so... I think Ted was trying to get the guinea pig since he was the first one to go on selects. I definitely think that was what he was going for, but he went with German. I'm not quite sure why. What are you willing to bet that we're going to have a record youngest podium this year, says Samar. Or Samar. What am I willing to bet that we're going to have a record youngest podium this year? So who would that need to be? Norris? Sonoda would be good on there. Wouldn't that be brilliant? What am I? I'm not ready to bet anything because, as you'll have seen if you saw my preview, my predictions are freaking terrible. I don't know if you saw my predictions, Dan, but my predictions for this weekend, there was Sainz would have a faultless weekend and would take pole, win the sprint, and win the race. That was over pretty much straight away. Said watch Hamilton in the wet because we know he can deliver, so he might spring a surprise. Yeah. And I said...
It was a surprise.
What was the other thing I said? Both Haas boys and Albon in the points. I wasn't a million miles away from that. And double points for Aston Martin in the sprint. So I just got my days mixed up there. But
that's a hot take on Aston Martin. I'd say that's the most risky of all of them.
Probably.
Both Aston Martins in the top 8. Goodness me, I don't even want to think what you were doing the night you did those predictions.
It was the alcohol, probably. No, I really wanted to get behind Carlos Sainz this weekend, but as I said on Twitter, I'm never doing it again. I'm never backing Carlos Sainz again. And it's not Sainz hate, I just don't want to ruin his entire weekend, because, I'll be held responsible, I'm sure. Formula E at Monaco last year was great, to be fair, says Alex A. Good point. That's coming up soon, isn't it? Formula E Monaco, and that's a... That's the full layout again, isn't it? So
yeah, it is. Yeah,
that should be fun. Cravone says Silverstone is quality over quantity with overtakes. Last year, France was a good strategy race among the top 2, but not sure if that'll play out always. I mean, you'd think with the number of configurations they've got at Paul Ricard, if it wasn't working, they'd try something else, but apparently not. I'm hoping it. Not, I'm quite happy with the French Grand Prix. I'd love to see them back at Manicourt, and I'm sure there are other tracks as well that people would love to see it at. But I'm just not a big fan of Paul Ricard. Plus, it just gives me a headache. I mean, I give lots of people a headache. So there you go. What can I say? One more then. The Max says Yuki, Lando, and Mick would be an average age of 22. So that, I mean, first of all, can we see that race? Sonoda, Norris, and Schumacher on the podium. We'll have that one definitely. Josh says I'm keeping my fingers crossed for Russell win at Silverstone. Aidan, the only thing is that they won't have FP1 on the same weekend. F2 drivers are racing, and the F2 calendar is massive. That's a very good point actually from Aidan. A lot of the youngsters are in F2, aren't they? Apart from poor Oscar Piastri, who sat doing nothing except running Alpine's admin. on Twitter, which is about all he's doing, bless him. So not quite what he wants to do this weekend, but good point. Yeah, they'll have to squeeze them in around F2, won't they? Definitely. And last one then from Adam Osborne. Let's go for it. First teammates to crash this year, Dan. What do you reckon? They'll have to be close to each other.
Harder than I thought.
I was ready to just go, it's going to be, but I'm not actually quite sure. I can't see it being Perez and Verstappen. I don't think it'll be Leclerc and Sainz. Ricciardo, bless him, doesn't seem to be on the pace of Norris, so that's not likely. I can't see it being Russell and Hamilton either.
Oh, it's got to be Haas. It's got to be Haas, surely.
Really?
K-Max, yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
no.
I lived through that for years, those two running into each other, and Shumi loves the spin.
James just said, and it's a fair shout if you remember Jeddah, Ocon and Alonso. If they're allowed to race like that again, could get spicy.
Yeah, that's not a. I still think Haas. I'm convinced. There's not. Also Alpha Tauri, I feel you could maybe throw in there. But I suppose it's just which teammates are pretty close to each other, right?
Which at the minute, actually, when you look at the first few races, actually, that's quite a hard question as well. Which teammates are close to each other? Because, Perez was second today, but he was 16 seconds behind Verstappen. Norris was third. Ricciardo was down in 18th. Russell was fourth. Hamilton was 13th. Bottas was fifth. Zhou was 15th. Leclerc was sixth. Sainz didn't finish. Tsunoda was seventh. Gasly was 12th. So it's Vettel and Stroll then. Vettel 8th and Stroll 10th.
Oh, there we go. Unlucky Aston Martin.
We'll wrap it up there then. That was quite a interesting. Do you know, Adam, I thought that was going to be an easier question than it was. Thank you for that. I enjoy it when we go a little bit random there. Thank you very much, Dan. It's been too long, mate. I'm not accepting it being that long again, or I'm going to do sod all about it, because what can I do? But yeah, thank you for joining me today, mate. It was great to talk to you, and hopefully we'll be having you on again soon. But pretty stellar start to the season. I think you sound happy. You sound like you're enjoying your F1.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, last year was rubbish, so it's nice. It's nice to have a good season for once. But no, thanks for having me, mate. It's been too long. I'm hoping to come back, maybe once more this season. I don't know. We'll see. Depends if there's some good racing, which I got a funny feeling there might be. So thanks for having me, buddy.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have a good season. I think we'll be all right, Dan. But yeah, thank you very much, and I'm sure I'll talk to you soon.
Cheers, man. See you later, chat.
Thank you to Dan. Thank you to you guys as well. Thank you for your super chats. So thank you to Charles Edward Cheese as well. Where are we at? So we're at 371, 696 still here. So before you leave, please do drop a like. Need 130 basically to get that to 500 for Charles Edward Cheese. So please do drop a like. Always appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe as well. Lots of content to come on the channel over the next few days and weeks and whatever follows. I'm hoping to do 2 this week. And then, of course, we're gearing up for the Miami Grand Prix weekend. First time in Miami, which will be fun. I've just seen the track and I'm a little bit like, that's odd, but I'm hoping that we get a good one. But yeah, definitely looking forward to Miami. It's always nice to have a new track on the calendar. A lot of unknowns as well, which is good stuff. And then it's on to Spain and off we go again. Very good stuff. Yeah. Looking forward to it. Look, I've enjoyed the season so far. It's been great doing his reactions. I hope that's coming across, because I'm just enjoying chatting with you guys and whoever's on with us. It's just been a good start, and I hope this continues all the way to Abu Dhabi. Like I say, I'll be back later this week with some more content. You can follow me over on social media. All of the links you need for that are in the description down below. And don't forget to drop that like before you disappear as well. Always appreciated. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word. And until next time, goodbye.